Sword of Coming Chapter 834. Qin Pingon said goodbye to her husband and left the alley early in the morning. Thinking about the letter of appointment, the husband sent it and Ning Yao accepted it. Qin Pingon was in a good mood. The old monk who was in charge of guarding the alleys put down the white jade dojo again in the alleys. Apart from practicing in this life, the old man had no other preferences anyway. Lu Jia really just simply likes to cultivate the Tao. As for the realm or something, don't force it, love will not come anyway. Lao Tzu is not used to you. It's just weird. Could that apprentice be struck by lightning if he didn't protect the way yesterday? It's rare to have no bluffing and bluffing over there to play those martial arts styles, so you can breathe all night, very diligent, use the river cart transport technique of gold liquid to return the blood, and run the small Zhoutian over and over again. It is about sincere. Because of the spirit, it's kind of like a thing. In addition to his own practice this night, Lu Hua's spiritual flow turned to the sky, with his visual magical powers, like an immortal traveling on a crane in a vast world of his own unique golden jade jungle, out of the white crane under the Jiang Palace, on the Chongqing Bridge, watch the water and enlighten the Tao. The old monk also had to pay attention to Zhao Duanming's circulation route, so that he could select defects afterwards and help his disciples find out and fill vacancies. Qin Pingon stopped near the entrance of the alley, waited a moment, bent his fingers to knock on the door, tapped lightly and smiled. Master Lu, stop by the door, don't you mind? When the knock on the door sounded in the alley, Lu Jia just converged his mind and his practice came to an end. The old Yuaning was deeply moved. This young man, worthy of the embroidered tigers Jr., has a really poisonous vision. Seeing his own practice situation so realistically, the old monk got up from the futon, displayed his magical powers, opened a small door to the Baiyu dojo and said, "Please come in. There is an extra word of invitation. It is because your husband is Wensheng's face. It has nothing to do with whether the sword fairy is not the sword fairy, the hidden official is not hidden." However, in just one day, first the young hidden official came, Ning Yao's sharp sword, and when Xing came by, Lu Hua felt that his usual deserted path of practice was rarely so lively. It's just that I was thinking about finding that guy for a drink. Isn't he already drinking at this moment, so I can only toast 3 glasses with the old coachman? Qin Pingon stepped into it, glanced at the young man who was still practicing and asked in his heart, "Is the old master going to wait until Duan Ming has entered the Golden Core realm, and then teach a superior thunder method that is naturally compatible with his numerology?" Lu Jia looked weird and wanted to nod her head very much. He slapped a swollen face to fill up a fat man with a young man who was not confused, but the old man's conscience is not relieved. It doesn't matter if he loses face. He sighed, "There is a fart thunder of a Dao Ju, I'm so sad." Qin Pingon was surprised. With the background of the Zhao family in Tianshui, can't you find a lay rectification? Lu Jia shook his head. In the past few years, the Zhao family only found a few secrets of the thunder method. It is 1,000 miles away from the authentic 5 thunders of Longhu Mountain. They dare to give it and I dare not teach it. He is really a sword immortal who doesn't know the price of oil, salt, firewood and rice. Lei Fa is known as the ancestor of 10,000 laws on the mountain. How can this secret record of true law be so easy to get? And it is not a matter of money at all. Beipingzi, the Immortal family, there are not many people who specialize in thunder method, and there is no one close to the word authentic. Even the great heavenly monarch of the gods, Qizhen, dare not say that he is good at thunder method. Qin Pingon thought for a while and said, "I'm going to take a trip to the divine continent of China. I have a friend on the mountain. He is a nobleman from the heavenly master's mansion. I have made an appointment to go to Longhu Mountain as a guest. I will see if I can fight for it." She made up a decent secret book, but this matter cannot be guaranteed. Lu Jia frowned and said, "For no reason, why are you so invigorating and mobilizing people to give a piece of Tianda incense to Duanming for free? Why, you are trying to win over Tianshui Zhao as an ally of Luopishen in Dali." Qin Pingon shook his head and smiled. "It's really going to happen. I accidentally missed the secret book of thunder method in Renyun Yun Tower. It's a thanks to Master Lu for helping to take care of the brother's house. Master Lu just needs to do it. One thing is to conceal this from the Zhao family in Tianshui. In short, it has nothing to do with me. Then I will preach for Duan Ming Anshin." Lu Jia will be skeptical. "It's that simple, really nothing to calculate?" Qin Pingon asked back. "I can't believe in Qin Pingon who meets in a peaceful water, but Master Lu Xian can't believe in my husband?" Lu Jia laughed dumbly, hesitated and nodded. This kid has moved out of Wenxing. This is feasible. Confucian scholars, the most important context and orthodoxy, cannot make any jokes. It's just that the old cultivator suddenly recovered his senses and said with a smile, "Good boy, if you lie to me, if you don't do anything, you can earn a good impression from me, right?" Qin Pingon deliberately looked puzzled and said, "What do you say?" Lu Jia burst into laughter, pointed his finger at the young man who thought he was a fool and clicked, "Even if you have a good relationship with Tian Shifu, a Confucian disciple who is not in Longhushan Daomai after all, I am afraid it is a big day. Master, I don't dare to preach your Five Thunders real method without authorization. You have just said it yourself. You can only use the opportunity of reading books to piece together and touch your conscience. Can a cheat be better than the one found by the Zhao family in Tianshui? I don't find a good reason because it leaks on all sides and is untenable." The old monk stopped talking immediately, and saw that the sword fairy smiled and raised his hand. 5 thunders gathered in the palm of good fortune, and the Taoism was lofty li fahei. Lu Jia looked intently, looked and looked again, nodded lightly and said as usual, "The little master is a master of thunder. He is worthy of being a disciple of the sage Wen, the brother of the embroidered tiger who has learned from the best. Cast a furnace, admire and admire. It's settled. I thank you first and only waited for the little master to accidentally lose this secret book in the house, and then I picked it up by accident. Just." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I will carefully write down all the matters needing attention in practicing this method, and carefully append the end of the book. The text will only be more cumbersome and detailed than the main text. The realm of the old fairy is placed there and I will protect the Tao afterwards. Teaching the FA is absolutely not a problem." Lu Jia was a little embarrassed. Qin Pingon said, "I have to bother with the old immortal teacher. Help me and Tianshui's patriarch Zhao family to ask for a picture and write the Zhao family motto." Of course it has nothing to do with Qin Pingon. Being able to be called here to guard the alley by the senior, Qin Pingon was sure that Lu Jia must be a tight-lipped person. So there was no worry that the old monk would miss his mouth when he was on the Zhao family in Tianshui. Lu Jia breathed a sigh of relief and asked for calligraphy and painting, a trivial matter. Even if he carried a basket to the door, it was nothing. It was for the face of Master Zhao, who wrote beautifully. The Tianshui Zhao family, who was described as Ma Shi Zhao by the Dali officialdom, has a very literary family motto. Qin Pingon is especially fond of the few words. The weather should be clear and high, the knowledge should be profound and far-reaching, the standing should be strong and sincere, and the color should be suitable. Riz Wang. In fact, after Qin Pingon came to Beijing this time and met Zhao Duanming, he wanted to ask for a copy of the family motto handwritten by the patriarch of the Zhao family. It should not be hung in his study and can be given to the little worm tree. It's just that the situation in the capital is still unclear. Qin Pingon had planned to wait until things happened before opening up with Zhao Duanming. "So right now you can get it without spending money." The old monk was suddenly taken aback. Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at him. Zhao Duanming's mind was immersed in the world and there was a flow of air that echoed each other so that the spirit of the whole person was fading out and people were like mountains. Feiyun is hovering, there are signs of lightning and thunder. Qin Pingon glanced at Lu La, who was taken aback, nodded immediately and said that you just protect Duanming. Qin Pingon stepped forward to Zhao Duanming's side, stomping lightly, the closed-eyed young man sitting cross-legged on the futon, and then floated into the air. Qin Pingon raised a hand and gently stroked the young man's head to help Zhao Duanming calm his mind. The palm of the 5 thunder-crowded hands turned into together, gently tapped the center of the young man's eyebrows to calm him, and instantly rise to the top a state of sleep. Lu Hua's eyes widened and his expression was unbelievable. He saw that the surroundings of the disciple's head were magnificent, like a mysterious picture of the world being Taoized. The sun and the moon were suspended in the sky, countless stars revolving. I saw that wearing a blue shirt from the bright galaxy with my heart, I picked out a golden light lingering and thundering pocket star, and then with that little hand as if as a longevity bridge slowly rolling into the young man's eyebrows, the star that was blurred by Taoism within Zhao Duanming's personal small world, following the aura of Shaozhong, revolving in an orderly manner. The young man was originally scattered everywhere a few strands of the essence of Taoism that even I didn't even notice. If I get an edict, it will come in an instant, and I will worship the ancient star that seems to be suspended in the sky. Qin Pingon lightly patted the young man's forehead, and the young man brought the futon to the ground again. Lu Jia asked cautiously, Qin Pingon, are you a great cultivator of the Ascension realm? Qin Pingon smiled and said, I am not, my wife is. Lu Jia endured but still couldn't hold back. He asked the biggest question in his heart. Qin Pingon, why did you kidnap Ning Yao? Qin Pingon adjusted his clothes, shook his sleeves, smiled and said nothing. Isn't this obvious? It depends on appearance and tolerance. Lu Jia was stunned for a long time, jokingly, are you a tailor? Qin Pingon smiled and said goodbye and strode out of the alley. The young man who had been kept in the dark slowly recovered his senses. After opening his eyes, he stood up and jumped a few times, only feeling extremely refreshed. Finding the master sitting on the futon drinking, Zhao Duanming squatted over, smelling the wine to relieve gluttony. Lu Jia smiled and said, it was not clear before why the national teacher asked me to wait patiently, saying that I should owe the salary first, and then someone will come here to pay. The world is messy, twists and turns, and it's not real, but it depends on the general quality of people's hearts. Lu Ka is quite accurate. Zhao Duanming said, Master is embarrassed to accept my brother Chen's money? Master, of course you are very strong about practicing and preaching. Otherwise, you won't be able to teach me such an apprentice, but you really have to learn from me when it comes to humanity and sophistication. Lu Jia smiled and stopped speaking and turned his head to look into the alley. The former national teacher Cui Huang had been here year after year, day after day alone, but he never felt lonely. The worry of the heart is like a tiger's tail, and it is involved in the spring ice. Now there are more juniors walking in the alleys. It is as clear as the sun and the moon and as far away as the journey of the stars. It seems that the sword fairy in Qingshan, although young, is not a chess piece, but is located in the capital where the mountains and rivers of a country are the chessboard. Invite your opponent to take a seat and try it. The old monk thought about it again, quite proud. The janitor myself, Qin Pingon Ning Yao, and Wen Xing can barely be regarded as stopping the three. Who can compare to it? Lu Jia coughed, handed over a jug of wine and smiled, Duanming, drink. The teenager patted off Master's hand and laughed and said, Master is talking about laughing, what kind of wine to drink? The disciple is young, but he can't stand the smell of wine. Anyway, only a few steps away when he arrived at the inn, Qin Pingon was not in a hurry to find Ning Yao. He chatted with the shopkeeper first, and after chatting he asked about the girl. The old man yelled, the surname is Qin, don't eat the bowl and look at the pot. Hurry up and put away the crooked mind. Besides, did you kid take the wrong medicine? My girl looks pretty but she doesn't feel better. Girl Ning. Qin Pingon smiled and tentatively said, the shopkeeper, what do you think? Who am I? The shopkeeper has seen the 3 teachers and 9 Lu who go north and south, and you have long developed a pair of golden eyes. I really can't see it. I just think she is good. The old shopkeeper laughed angrily. Stop it, stop it. Could it be that I'm going to learn the art with you, a little girl's family? What kind of martial arts skills? Let me talk more about this. To talk about the martial arts in the market, let alone sell that dogskin plaster with guns or smashing boulders on his chest to earn some hard money. Although the young man in front of him is mostly a quagmire who lives here, he wants saying that you let your daughter go to learn martial arts with someone. Isn't it just a few days after you get calloused? How can you marry someone? It hurts to think about it. The most worried thing is that stupid girl female. When I was young, I dreamed of being a heroine of the world. Fortunately, there was a time when the 2 gangsters of E Chi Lane and Cheer Street fought in groups. It was a fierce fight and the bricks were broken a lot. I saw my girl sullenly ran home. After that, I felt relieved. I just yelled that when I grow up, it's not too late to practice my internal skills first. Qin Pingon said, then if I was in the inn with her and met her on foot, wouldn't it be illegal? The old man yelled, lowered his voice and said, what the do you picture? Qin Pingon, you honestly tell me, otherwise they'll really have to chase people. There are 2 sons but only 1 girl. I was kidnapped by your kid and the murderous aunt of my family can kill me. The old shopkeeper really didn't think this young foreigner was a wicked person. What's more, the world is peaceful now. The days of the people of Dali are safe and secure every day, not to mention the people in the rivers and lakes. The gods on the mountain dare not. The old man suddenly asked, Qin Pingon, tell me the truth about you. Which sect do you belong to and how big is your name? In the boundary of Longzhou, I only heard that there was a towering Piyun mountain, the Wei Shanjun who was rumored to be rich in wealth, and the Longquan sword sect full of sword immortals. Qin Pingon smiled. The little sect, I don't know the shopkeeper anyway, there are not many people, but I can guarantee that my house is good. The old man sneered and said, if I go out I will tell people that I am here, which is one of the best inns in Beijing. Every day I go in and out. It is not the great masters of the rivers and lakes like Yu Hong and Zhou Haijing, or the immortal master who drives the clouds and mists. Believe it or not. Qin Pingon nodded and said, I don't believe it. The old man asked, you kid wouldn't really like my girl, right? Could it be love at first sight? Qin Pingon smiled bitterly, really not. The old man was relieved and nodded. That's all right, and then he patted the table, which is very bad. My daughter is not worse than Na Ningyao. The old man waved his hand and he didn't look forward to get out. After Qin Pingon left, someone from the yamen soon came to look up the book Two Faces, but the official card was correct and the old shopkeeper didn't think much. After they turned to the names of Qin Pingon and Ning Yao, the two smiled at each other. One of the young officials continued to turn the page casually, and then smiled casually. Shopkeeper Lu, business is booming. The old man lay on the counter at will and he didn't give the slightest bit of attention to these public servants. His own inn was opened on the edge of those two streets. 2 generations almost 50 years old have never seen any civil servants and generals. There in the center. The Huangzi Gongqing, not only a familiar face but also a lot of encounters on the road, but also can say hello. In this regard, the old shopkeeper has always been quite arrogant, so this time just smiled and said, business is okay. Ning Yao didn't deliberately immerse himself in spiritual practice and cultivate his sword intent, otherwise it would be tantamount to a great battle between the two worlds. She just sat at the table for a night, and then in the early morning she opened her eyes, subconsciously stretched out her fingers and gently twisted the corner of a sleeve. When the knock on the door sounded softly, Ning Yao said, the door is not fastened. Qin Pingon pushed the door and walked in. Ning Yao glanced at the green shirt with a jade hairpin on his head and said nothing. Qin Pingon took out a few essays written by the writer from his sleeve and smiled. I still have to stay in the capital for a few days. I'm afraid you will get bored, so I picked a few books and flipped through it. Ning Yao looked at a few books on the table, carried them and asked, there is no Jianghu romance and legendary going on? Qin Pingon asked, do you want to look at this category? Ning Yao asked back. Otherwise, look at those strange smoke powder and strange nonsense. Qin Pingon was speechless. Those romances at every turn are the hidden masters instilling a lot of internal strength for the younger generation, which is quite nonsense. But what the daughter-in-law said is correct. Qin Pingon first talked about the visit to the Confucian temple invited by the Saint of Rites. Ning Yao nodded and said that there was no problem. Then Qin Pingon immediately turned around to find books. But there seemed to be no such books in the library. I remember that when he was still Xiao Haitan's big disciple, he pestered Old Wei and Xiao Bai privately every day, saying that everyone had passed her several decades of skill. Later the old cook filed a complaint, and then Pei Qin ate chestnuts to his fullness before letting Wei Xian and Lu Baixiang go. The old shopkeeper saw Qin Pingon back and forth jokingly, you can't look good. It's pretty fast for a young person. Qin Pingon pretended not to understand and asked, the shopkeeper, is there a bookstore nearby? The old man nodded. Not far, there is a bookstore half a street away, but the shop so close to Cheer Street in Ichi Lane, you can imagine that the price is not cheap and they are mostly rare books. Wait. Now you guys in the martial art of the rivers and lakes who have to deal with others beforehand, can you say a few words? The old man roughly pointed the way. Qin Pingon thanked him and said with a smile, daughter-in-law wants to read a book so she can look for it there. Qin Pingon took a walk and found the street. There were indeed many bookshops. He spent 7 or 8 ounces of silver, picked a few books, put them in his sleeves, changed his mind and detoured to another place about 3 miles away. Through the streets and alleys, Qin Pingon finally walked to a ferry house inn at the end of the alley. The door face was not big and there was no ferry house ostentation. The ordinary master passed by, he would definitely not take a second look. This decapitated road will only turn around and leave. Qin Pingon knew about a few Songzus who went out of the city last night to travel long distances. Their figure started from this place. Later, when they returned to the capital, they also settled here. Most likely this is their place of cultivation. As soon as Qin Pingon was about to knock on the door, he frowned slightly, and his figure fluttered backwards and fell 10 feet away. There was a female ghost monk in the Golden Core realm, her figure fictitious, from the door with the painted door god. A flew out. Chen Pingon glanced and found that it was the female ghost next to the young Yuanying Jianxiu, mostly Song Su and Guling, but they belonged to different mountains. Is this to discuss the Taoism? Still asked Jian Wenquan. It was just that she saw her figure spinning, her colorful clothes fluttering, her teeth and claws flaring, and she seemed to have nothing to do with her, and her cannibalistic eyes and coveting face. What happened? Chen Pingan's hands were sleeved, and he just moved sideways to avoid the female ghost Yufeng's figure, like a colorful female ghost spinning half a circle, spreading his arms about to hug the blue shirt. Are you endless? Chen Pingon didn't turn his head, just raised an elbow and slammed it back, hitting the female ghost in front of the door. The ghost fell to the ground so dizzy she sat up, pulled out a kerchief from her sleeve with 2 fingers, wiped the corner of her eyes and started to cry. Chen Pingon turned his head, frowned and asked, "What's the matter?" The female ghost was full of vigor and did not speak, but floated towards Chen Pingon suddenly, without murderous intent, as if she was blindly stalking. Chen Pingon always put his hands in the sleeves, raised a foot, kicked her forehead, and the female ghost hit the wall. Wrong. It's some kind of weird blindfold that can cover the mind. In short, seeing is imaginary. Chen Pingon squinted, sticking out his sleeves with 5 fingers like hooks, grabbing the head of the female ghost, pressing down quickly and smashing it to the ground, twisting his toes slightly and covering the road with martial arts, not allowing her to escape. Then she poked her heart with a tiptoe and made a bang. The poor girl ghost's figure in colored clothes like a rag wiped all the alleys, and then the woman's body in colored clothes suddenly expanded and hovered over near the entrance of the alley. It was like a huge painted lattice picture on the wall. Chen Pingon reminded, "It's almost enough." On the walls on both sides of an alley, the sky was dim and dark in an instant, and countless female ghost heads were protruding, but they were not stern, but smiled like a flower, like the infatuated woman who finally saw the lover return home. Chen Pingon had already planned to be ruthless and sighed for no reason and said, "One last warning." Yuan Huajing in the inn walked into the corridor and said in a deep voice, "Change Yen, stop." The female ghost named Gayan immediately gathered her magic skills and appeared in the alley with a graceful posture and salutes. The little girl changed her beauty and saw Gongzi Chen. Chen Pingon explained, "I'm looking for someone." Gai Yen smiled, "It's good to find someone. I opened this inn. Anyone can find it. I will lead the way for young Master Chen." Chen Pingon shook his head and said, "No." The woman was extremely aggrieved and timidly said, "The inn is my site. Whether to open the door to welcome guests to earn the fairy money, there is actually no fixed number, it just depends on the little girl's mood. Chen Gongzi is a gentleman, can't you break in?" If Song's 6 small hills belong to strange people, but both their status and temperament are still normal, then the nickname Yelong Jian Xiu Yuan Huajing his 4 subordinates, it seems that there are no a fuel-saving lamp. In addition to this female ghost named Gayan, there is also a young rider named Kushu from Yixiu, and a 5-element practitioner from the Yinyang family. Finally, there is a wild Xiu from Shanzi's quirky background. He looks like a young man with a cold face and murderous brows. I took a name for myself, my last name is Go. The young man has a bad temper and has a strange desire to be a national teacher of a small country, to become a vassal of the Dali vassal no matter how small it is. Chen Pingon shrank the mountains and rivers in one step and broke open the inn's unremarkable forbidden formation. He looked around and saw a house in the cloud and mist. With a stroke of 2 fingers he opened the door and entered, falling down and smiling. Said, "There were so many people last night it's hard to say." The young man was struggling. Actually, he had already walked out of the dojo where there is a cave in the house. At this moment he saw the blue shirt in front of him. The young man first clasped his fists and then made a fuss. He seemed to feel wrong. Finally he had to scratch his head, shouted Mr. Chen, and then started grinning silly. In the old days of Shihao Kingdom, in the dog meat shop, there was a young man who was mistaken for being a dumb boy. Later he met a man in a blue cotton-padded coat, took him to a meal, said a lot and gave him a possibility. Finally, I borrowed a small summer money from the teenager. My enemy. The Gayan in the alley was not annoyed, but shyly stomped and followed. When she came to this courtyard she was extremely surprised. Did she know Chen Pingon? Why, never heard of this. Han Zhoujin also came to the entrance of the small courtyard, and there was a follower Yu beside him. The boy smiled brilliantly. "Mr. Chen, my name is Go Xian today." Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. The name is good. Go Xian. Don't forget the original live. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand. The boy hurriedly took out a small summer money that he had kept all the time from his sleeve and handed it to the other party, apologizing. Mr. Qin, I spent the small summer money back then. Qin Pingon said, I borrow money to repay and I can't talk about interest. The boy grinned, knowing that Mr. Qin was joking. Qin Pingon put away the small summer money, twisted his wrist, and produced a green bamboo stick, which is the hiking stick of the literati and gentlemen for mountaineering. On the top of the hiking stick, there is a 2-character inscription, Zhi Yuan. The young man held a hiking stick in his arms and was not good at words, but silently bowed to Mr. Qin to thank him. Next moment, before the young man raised his head and stood up, he was instantly alarmed. In fact, not only Go Xian but also the female ghost in the courtyard, Han Zhoujin and Yu Yu at the door, and Song Su gathered in a nearby courtyard. Everyone found themselves in the cloud. The formation master Han Zhoujin had already sacrificed the ruins of the fairy palace, and then there was only a sword light between the sky and the earth, breaking the sky and the earth, forcibly breaking the mountain and water restriction of an ancient Tongbai blessed land, only to see that Qin Pingon grabbed it with one hand. Gaian spun, holding Gokun's neck with one hand. The female ghost Gaian's aura was suppressed by her fist, almost stagnated, and a little bit of wind and grass. The natal chi house belonging to the 5 elements has the heartbreaking pain, as for Go Xian has fainted. The most troublesome part is that Gaian and Go Xian are lightly stabbed by Fei Jin at once. Jian Qi penetrated into the small world in the body. The sword immortal in Qingshan, who did not say hello, looked around, took a few glances at the aura of the avenue of the ancient immortal dojo, then stared at Han Zhoujin and smiled and said, I'm a little bit strange, how did you kill back then? The monster army accounted for the Jade Innocent Realm, attacked and beheaded? No, it's just to give you the head, right? Qin Pingon said to himself. Or, as long as there is a shortage of manpower, the 11 of you can only be considered as a mess? It's okay, just come in. Besides, there is no need for you to plan to kill others in the world. Good thing the debt will be repaid one day, and that's it now. The Yin and Yang family Qi practitioner was about to pinch the Dao Ju and use an extremely mysterious natal magical power. At the price of 1 level of self-fall, he helped the 11 people to return to the before, and make preparations early. As a result, there was a sword light directly above his head. Yuan Huajing appeared as Sui Lin's guardian, offering a natal flying sword, using the flying sword against the flying sword, cutting off the sword light. Never thought that the 5-element family practitioner was around him. The sword light lit up countless, directly stirring up that slender thread of time. Qin Pingon left Go Xian and Gaian in his hands, and walked to Dao Lu Gelying in one step. This Taoist priest actually chose to directly explode the golden core and Yuaning and replace them with ordinary earth immortal monks. The end of the elimination. Qin Pingon, full of fists like a waterfall and scathed, walked out of this slightly chaotic battlefield at random, stretched out his hand to hold down Yu Yu of the military cultivator and punched close to him, gently pulled closer to him and then turned around. With a heart-to-heart elbow, Yu Yu vomited blood and flew out dozens of feet. His figure flashed. Just about to lift his foot and step on it, the corner of his eye found that Yu Yu was actually far away. It was a bit interesting. In the small world of the caged finches, what I saw in my eyes still received interference. It seems that the female ghost, the legendary painter profiler on the mountain, was still hiding a lot of clumsy in the alley. So the next moment, in the eyes of 11 people, the heavens and the earth are tilted, twisted and upside down to varying degrees. Like a world cut into countless realms by the master. The female ghost Gaian was about to make a move, and her vision was full of sword light, and dozens of long swords were nailed into her body and the colorful clothes in an instant. Go Xian, who was supposed to have been sleeping for a long time, suddenly opened his eyes, and Qin Pingon stepped on the center of the mouth and passed out again. At the same time, Qin Pingon squinted the little novice monk and smiled, as if saying that it was you. Wearing a blue shirt as if stepping out of the door, volleyed into the air, appeared behind the little novice monk, wrapped his arms around the little monk's neck, and supported the little monk's chin with one hand, but Qin Pingon hesitated and chose to stop temporarily and pat. He patted the little monk's head and smiled, "Be careful later." With together he drew a circle and around the little novice monk, a golden thunder pond appeared. Qin Pingon changed the battlefield, shook his sleeves and hung the talisman like two galaxies, besieging the 5 elementalists. Han Zhoujin was shocked and he didn't know when he actually lost the chi traction with the Xianfu ruins. Qin Pingon looked around, raised his hand casually, patted the flying swords of Yuan Huajing and Song Su and said, knowing that you have a lot of back players but it is useless. If you don't have a chance to use it you have already lost. With a flick of his finger he blasted a fragment of the golden body at the Yinyang family Chi practitioner. Qin Pingon said, it's a compensation. Let's go back. The time reversed for a moment and the 11 people returned to their respective positions, but with the support of the little novice's dharma and supernatural powers, everyone still remembers. Sui Lin sat down on the ground with a pale face, but the golden body fragment in his hand could make up for himself. There is still a surplus in the loss of Taoism. Half of the monks were not convinced and the remaining half had lingering fears. The sword immortal in Qingshan with the most fierce shot seemed to be the only one who was not affected by the long river of time. He was the first to return to the place of the inn, standing in the corridor with his arms and sleeves, and smiled with the boy who was still bowing his head, scared. The boy was dull and speechless, still holding a mountain stick, got up and scratched his head, then shook his head. Mr. Qin, I learned it. Qin Pingon whispered, cultivating on the mountain, the clouds are treacherous, the higher the climb the greater the mountain breeze, so be careful in the future. Then Qin Pingon laughed. Of course it's not that you have to be careful of my sneak attacks in the future. Today's shot is an exception. Qin Pingon began to help the 11 people to resume the fight and then gave some suggestions. As for whether they listened, it didn't matter. If they weren't the monks carefully selected by seniors and spent a lot of money to cultivate them, Qin Pingon would be too lazy today. Then a large piece of golden body fragments of ancient gods is not money. Qin Pingon finally asked in his heart, Zhou Xian, what happens when I see someone who eats dog meat now? Zhou Xian was silent for a moment, raised his head and said frankly with Mr. Qin, I still feel uncomfortable, so if you listen to Mr. Qin, you must become the national teacher of that small country in the future and order that no one is allowed to eat dog meat in a country. Qin Pingon nodded, take it slowly. Qin Pingon was about to leave this fairy home inn. Unexpectedly, the female ghost had the courage to approach a few steps, blinking a pair of big eyes. Master Qin, let's go now, I'll see you off? Qin Pingon angrily smiled and said, is it greasy or crooked? Let's talk about it. What exactly are you drawing? She looked a little shy. Learning from Han Zhoujin, she was upset at the sight and couldn't hold it. Han Zhoujin's face flushed and she became angry and said, Gayan, clean your mouth. Qin Pingon was speechless and passed away in a flash. Temple of Fire. Under the flower shed, Aunt Feng squinted her eyes, came uninvited and entered without knocking on the door. Who are they? The old coachman said straightforwardly. The situation forces you to answer Qin Ping's 3 questions. What do you think that kid will ask? I prepared early. Don't shy away. If it wasn't for you to make trouble, I wouldn't have to suffer more from those 2 swords. Aunt Feng smiled. Qin Pingon will definitely ask who you are first. The old coachman said, what else? Aunt Feng continued, the broken life porcelain, did you participate in it? The old coachman nodded, this is a good answer, no shit. Aunt Feng Tut said, you have a conscience, right? You have bet on the Ma family in Xinghua Lane a long time ago. The old coachman did not hide, I am most optimistic about Ma Kushuan, there is nothing to hide. But what the Ma family did has nothing to do with me. Neither instigated them nor helped to erase the traces afterwards. Aunt Feng thought for a moment. As for the 3rd question, there are too many things he might ask, it's hard to guess. Such as, for example, in the refining of Lizhu Dongshan's natal porcelain, who is the instigator? Do you want to answer? How? The old coachman took out a small porcelain bottle and opened it wide, surrounded by purple air, sniffed it lightly, and suddenly he was full of golden light, flowing around his body, mending his injuries. The body of the gods being cut by the sword repair is one thing good, that is, there is no remaining sword energy and the aftermath of the sword energy will be washed away by the long river of time. As long as the golden body does not break on the spot, no matter how severe the injury is afterwards, there will be more cracks. Can make up and repair the golden body. The old coachman was silent for a moment, a little helpless. Tell Ning Yao, as long as it is a question I don't want to answer, I can ask Qin Pingon to change it. Aunt Feng smiled and said, that's it. The old coachman sullenly said. The little lady gave an explanation, but there are only 3 things. The old coachman suddenly raised his head. You old lady, don't cheat me anymore. Aunt Feng joked. If it really doesn't work, it's okay to die for the Taoist friend and not to die for the poor. Let's show the roots and feet of that person in Qin Pingon. The old coachman shook his head. The 4 most difficult ghosts on the mountain, in fact, don't mess with anyone. The other 2 people behind the scenes, one of them is a dragon breeder from the line of Fulong. There is another from the land of Yinyang family. The one who is in the bright and the dark is the capital trainer who was beaten to death by Song Chongjing indiscriminately. The one in the dark, the site of the old 5 mountains of Dai, is all from this person. Handwriting. These few of them are immortal. Under the fence of the Lizhu cave, of course they have their own needs. The old ancestor of Fulongshi is betting on the Dali Song family, and by the way, suppressing the luck of the Lu family on Fulu Street. As for the anti-Feng, apart from protecting the road, it was just getting involved everywhere. For example, Chao Han and Yuan Xian were brought out of the Lizhu cave, and the pair of future civil and martial arts were given to the Great Court. Only with that ZTE the Song clan of Dai would not be cut off from Guizhou, and was easily annexed by the LV family, which was the former overlord of Dai. Compared to Aunt Feng and the old coachman, the Yinyang monk from the Lu family of Middle-earth was hiding behind the scenes, threading needles and leads all day and acting the most sneaky, but he was able to make sense and was within the rules. The old coachman said for no reason, within Jiazi, first come first served. Ma Kushuan actually has a chance. It means that the illusory and ubiquitous awe-inspiring luck has broken several continents, mountains and rivers, and the great monks of the 2 worlds have fallen so many, which one is not the one who is the original one, but they are all returned to the world. It was like an invisible battle. Earlier, the sword fairy embryos of the Great Wall of Sword Qi as well as the Baijin fairy of Tuyue Mountain actually belonged to the imminent warfare, and they all rose to the occasion. Later, the sword fairy Su Hao, the Baidi city Gukan and his ilk, one by one turned out to be born, rising extremely fast. So in the past 100 years, it has been a great year for cultivators and there is nothing to miss. Unless when Hai, who had gone to the sky, was thorough enough to be able to return to the world and war would start again. The old coachman glanced at the sky and sighed. I have to say, this thoroughness is indeed remarkable. Aunt Feng smiled and said, it is the way for monks to raise Tibet. The old coachman frowned and said, the merit is hard to come by. There is something wrong with Qin Pingan's brain. Aunt Feng shook her head, unwilling to say more about it. The so-called human nature in the final analysis is to like to fight with yourself. As a god, he is born to be able to classify into different categories, not bad, happy, angry, sad, and then subdivided into hundreds of boundaries, everywhere in order. Regarding this matter, the saints of the 3 religions all have many solutions. For example, the Buddhist Taoists all praise the observance of one law. More recently, only the old scholar who restored the temple of Confucianism is already in the Book of Sages. Exploring the heavenly secrets, for example, the mortal observations are suspicious, the center is uncertain, the outer objects are unclear, the bright moon travels at night, and when you see its shadow you think that ghosts. The heart is the king of the shape, and the lord of the gods is also needed. Self-restraint, self-deprivation, self-restraint. This is the essence of the old scholar's unmasking chapter. Therefore, at the inn earlier, the old scholar seemed unintentional and casual, and mentioned his unmasking chapter. At that time, Aunt Feng withdrew a gust of breeze and stopped eavesdropping on the conversation. The so-called rumors in the world were really not because she deliberately went to the auditorium, it was really due to her own destiny. Qin Pingon returned on the same road and approached the inn. She just happened to ran into the girl and went out. When she saw the guy, the girl turned around, ran back to the inn and walked around the counter. She hid beside her dad and then pretended to be ready to order. Qin Pingon crossed the threshold without squinting. Suddenly stopped, turned and walked out of the inn to the alley house. The big queen mother finally came. At the counter the girl whispered, "Father, did I wrong him?" The old shopkeeper said in a deep voice, "No, this kid is in the world with many eyes, he is trying to catch him." Qin Pingon was quite helpless. Walking slowly in the street and nothing happened, Qin Pingon began to babble casually. The ancient bamboo horse hit the waist of the skirt. Juma listened to the sound of selling flowers, the lotus charmed the fish, and the screens complained about the autumn of the jade. Clouds across the river cannot send water boats, The Magpie Bridge Immortal sees the pot in the sky, mountain ghosts sing Waniankan. Sort of Coming Chapter 835. At the entrance of the alley, a humble carriage was parked. The curtains were old, the horses were ordinary, and there was a woman in palace dress with a short stature. She was chatting with the old monk Wuxia, and the cheerful boy of Tianshuizhao's was a little more cautious than ever. The coachman is an acquaintance, still standing next to the carriage with his eyes closed. Qin Pingon kept walking slowly, smiled and stretched out 3 fingers, and the old coachman snorted coldly. The palace woman stopped chatting with the old monk, turned her head and looked at the blue shirt with a hosta on her head. She was slender and wore cloth shoes. She looked relaxed, not like a foreigner. It's more like walking in the courtyard of your own sight. The sword fairy in Qingshan striding across the capital, young and vigorous, but so. It's just that the young man didn't carry that long sword at the moment. It is said that it was refined from the tip of the sword of the fairy sword Tai Bai, but in the battle of Xingyang Mountain Wenjian, this sword is not much present and more is suppressed by swordsmanship. Most of them put the sword in the house. Zhao Yu, the servant of the Qing department of the Song dynasty, had a lot of immortality, and he also obtained a piece of Tai Bai immortal sword. As the man in the green shirt continued to approach, she frowned slightly, and she was a little bit guilty in her heart. How tall is the mud-legged boy of the past? After a while the 2 parties will be chatting, wouldn't you be a disadvantage? Previously in the Changchun Palace, through the Qin Tianjian and the broken porcelain, she only remembered the person in the scroll. The celestial spirit is ethereal, the lotus crown in the green gauze robes, and the Ganoderma lucidum in her hand. She really ignored the height of the person today. Lu Pa and the Empress Dowager Dolly said goodbye and took his disciple Zhao Duanming into the Baiyu Dojo, took the initiative to isolate the world and made way for both sides. The imperial woman waved to the old coachman who drove away. The Queen Mother of Li has a skillful appearance and a body like fat. Because she is not tall, even among the women in the south of the continent, the figure is relatively short, so she looks very small and exquisite, but there are the golden branches and leaves of the Daoist men. Whether, a woman who is only 30 years old. The woman's surname is Southern and she is a native of Yuzhong County, Tingzhou Dali. The family is just a local county. After she entered the palace and gained power, she did not follow the chickens and dogs to the sky, but fell silent. Her clothes are simple and elegant, and there is no extra decoration. It is only produced by the Weaving and Dyeing Institute under the supervision of the Beijing Shaofu, weaving the unique Moor pattern of the Weaving and Dyeing Institute. It is just a kitty. The weaving craft and the Lingluo material are not immortal things. There was nothing strange about it, but she brought a string of handmade chains and 12 snow-white beads, which was bright and lovely. There is no one around, so naturally no one dared to spy on this place without authorization. Nanzhan, the most powerful woman in Aquarius, turned sideways and gave a blessing, graceful and romantic. She smiled sweetly, met Mr. Chen. Qin Pingan stopped, clasped his fists and smiled. I have seen the Queen Mother. One more glance at the woman's hand ring, it's worthy of the name because every bead is a spiritual bead contained in Shanhazi, which can make people enlighten and remember the past, and there are things in this life. Forgetting, you only need to rub this pearl to get a better understanding. Almost all the ancestors in the world will find this pearl hard, and welcome the old ancestors who have been reincarnated by soldiers back to the mountain, and give this pearl to help the reincarnation. Getting up to the world of the last life and practicing 2 things. Nan Yen glanced at the place where the blue shirt stopped, not far or near, she just happened to be able to talk with her without looking up. Seems to be a great face to the other party. Nan Yengui is the Queen Mother and she is still willing to call her a gentleman respectfully, and one will vote for her husband. Be considerate and don't bully her small. Nan Yen smiled and said, Mr. Qin, why don't we go to the house and chat slowly? Qin Pingon nodded and said, the Queen Mother is the master, so she is naturally the guest. The 2 walked in the alley together, each close to the root of the wall. Looking ahead, Nanzhan said with emotion, it is a great fortune to turn the tide together. Mr. Qin traveled far to the Great Wall of Sword Qi and made great achievements. On the sea, the Dragon King will be killed again at the head of the city, and he will serve as the last hidden official as a foreigner. This feat, several worlds, has not been seen in 10,000 years, and I believe that there will be no more in the future. Dali has Mr. Qin, it is true, fortunately. Qin Pingan's hands were sleeved and he slowly said, the storm is wicked and the grassy spirit is awkward, that's all. Nan Yen was silent for a moment. Approaching the courtyard gate of the mansion, she suddenly asked, "Dare to ask Mr. Wenxing now, but he is meditating in the mansion? Will it disturb Wenxing's reading?" Qin Pingon pushed open the courtyard door, shook his head and said, "Mr. is not here." Nan Yen asked again, "Will Ning Zhenxian be wronged by staying at the ordinary inn? Do you need me to arrange accommodation?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "The Queen Mother's kindness is appreciated, but it's not necessary." The two sides settled in a courtyard and Nan Yen smiled and said, "Mr. Qin is drinking tea?" Qin Pingon leaned against the stone table with sleeves in both hands, turned his head and smiled. "Should we talk about business first?" Nan Yen smiled and said, "I wonder what Mr. Qin is calling me over this time?" Qin Pingan put out his sleeve with one hand. "Bring it." Nan Yen looked blank. "Mr. Qin is going to ask for something?" Qin Pingon kept that posture and smiled and said, "It's right for things to return to their original owners. Otherwise, it's too arrogant and rebellious to beg the Queen Mother for a life." Nan Yen looked around and said in doubt, "Return to the original owner? Dare to ask Mr. Qin, half of Aquarius Island, what is not my dolly?" Qin Pingon put his hands away, smiled and said, "Don't give it, forget it." Nan Yen seemed to be a little surprised by the other party's refreshment. She patted her forehead. "Remember, did Mr. Qin mean that life porcelain fragment?" Qin Pingon said, "The Queen Mother is out of the house this time, her hands are not worn for nothing." Nan Zan raised a hand, revealing a piece of snow-white wrist. "Why don't you give it to Mr. Qin? Maybe it's useful, it can relieve your urgent need." Qin Pingon narrowed his eyes and remained silent. Somewhere in the house, there is a faint dragon cry on the wall, which is touching. Brother right and left, if it is reasonable and useful, what to do with sword training. Unconsciously, the woman lowered her arm and placed it gently on the table. The beads touched the stone and rolled away slightly, creaking. She stared at the side face of the man in the green shirt and smiled. "Mr. Chen's jade, the world is really extraordinary. The world does not know that Mr. Chen's end is full of vitality. No one in the past he is better than Chao Xiai, and he still does not know the jade and two flying swords of the hermit. In fact, it is also shocking to the world. Others think of Mr. Chen's practice. Swordsmanship and boxing on the top of the two mountains are too unbelievable. But I think Mr. Chen's clumsy hiding is the true housekeeping skill." Seeing that Qin Pingon was unwilling to speak, she continued to say, "That piece of broken porcelain must be returned. As Mr. Qin said, it's reasonable to return to the original owner. Why don't I give it? It's just when to give it. I don't think I need to worry too much. This piece of broken porcelain has been left on my side for many years. It is different to help Mr. Qin keep it safe and secure. In that case, Mr. Qin, why rush it for a while?" Nanzhan stretched out his palm and gently brushed it across the tabletop. "I can replace your Majesty the Emperor. Assure you that we are willing to use the Song family background and the great power to help Mr. Qin ascend to the fairyland, the ascent to the ascendant." Bottleneck. At that moment, Mr. Qin has become the leader of the Immortal family on Izhou Mountain, just like Qin Chunan in South Pasuzhou, Huolongzhen in Beiju Luzhou, and Lu Jubao in Aizhou. "Then I will." A piece of broken porcelain was offered with both hands as a small congratulatory gift to wish Mr. Qin every success. During this period, the court of Dali had nothing to ask for Mr. Qin and Luapa Mountain. Qin Pingon turned his head and smiled and asked, "There is such a good thing in the world? Nothing is required, just lying down every day to enjoy the blessing. I am about to mistake my last name for Song." Nanzhan was full of vigor, staring at that one, and said, "Mr. Qin was joking. I just said that it is a blessing that Dolly has Mr. Qin. If you don't know how to cherish this." Nanzhan as Song's daughter-in-law, ashamed of the Song ancestors in Taimiao. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "In case the Empress Dowager has the face to go to worship incense and sacrifice, it would be a bit embarrassing if the sages and escorts of the Song dynasty's imperial temple are not seen." Nan Yen covered her mouth and smiled and said, "Mr. Qin has indeed changed a lot. Compared with the taciturn when he was a teenager, he is now very funny in speech." Qin Pingon nodded. "Long Jun is dead, half dead in vain, has gone to Lijian, and I have been with me for many years. There are men and women of all ages and everyone feels the same way." Nan Yen patted herself on her chest and said with lingering fear, "Mr. Qin, don't scare me. A woman of the family not only has long hair and short knowledge, but also has little courage." Qin Pingon stretched out a palm towards the door. Then don't give it away lest you scare the queen to death and you can't afford it. Nan Yen stood up, bit her lip and said with a sad expression in her eyes, "Then I am really gone?" Qin Pingon smiled and stood up. "It's better to send off the queen mother and do the best of the landlord's friendship." But Nanzan sat back down. Before taking the seat she bent her knees slightly, leaned forward, her hands drooped and then gently stroked the arc. The silk was smooth as water. After sitting down she raised her neck high and smiled charmingly. "I'm joking with Mr. Qin. You can't just allow Mr. Qin to be humorous, and Nanzan is not allowed to say something angry, right?" She said for no reason. "Mr. Chen's craftsmanship is very good, bamboo sticks, bookcases and chairs are all stylish. Back then Nanzan was on the riverside shop and I had learned it." It's just that before Nanzan finished speaking her neck was slightly cold, and the blue shirt was not visible in her vision, but there was a scabbard against her neck. Qin Pingon smiled and asked, "Just count. After a crosscut, how tall is the queen mother?" The woman in the palace costume shook her head. "Nan Yen is just a little golden pill. With Mr. Chen's swordsmanship he really wants to kill people. Wherever nonsense is needed. No more bluffing." Sure enough, Qin Ping's twisted his wrist and the long sword swept back to a wall of a wing. Qin Pingon takes his seat again. The woman smiled slightly. What is the southern emperor and the northern Yingguan but so? Just suddenly flashed. Nanzan's head flew high on the spot. She suddenly got up, grabbed the head with both hands and quickly put it back to her neck. Her palms rushed to wipe the wound, but she turned her head slightly and it hurt. He couldn't help being angry. Said, "Qin Pingon. Do you really dare to kill me?" Qin Pingon took out a jug of wine from his sleeve, and then took out a flower cup that was easily handled by the Confucian temple. He poured himself a glass of wine and drank for himself. "If you don't dare, don't you dare." Nanzan stood in place and sneered, "I really bet that you dare not kill me. Today's words are left here. You must wait patiently for yourself to become the bottleneck of the Ascension realm, and I will return your broken tiles, or killing me today is tantamount to rebellion. Tomorrow there will be a big Li cavalry besieging Luopa Mountain. The hunting envoy Chao Ping is responsible for personally leading the attack on Luopa Mountain, and Dong Hu of the Ministry of Rites is responsible for dispatching the gods of the mountains and rivers. You may wish to gamble, Sanjiang the of water, the gods of various mountains and the monarch of the mountain Wei Bo will watch from the wall by then or so." Nan Pin rubbed her neck, her soul trembled. She had never suffered such a great humiliation in her entire life, and she hated this rebellious mud bottle alley cultivator so much. She immediately sneered, "It's good for Wensheng, let you in addition Ning Yao, a Taoist priest in the ascended realm of swordsmanship. Don't forget, after all, we are the rules of the Middle-earth Confucian temple in the world, not to mention the literary sage who has just restored the gods. Even the saints of worship must respect themselves the etiquette rules." Never thought that the man in the green shirt smiled, stretched out his palm and pressed a few times. "Don't be anxious, what's the hurry, just make a harmless joke, don't you just allow Daoist Nanzhan to stop talking, don't let me care about it?" Live in Feijian. Nan Yen took a deep breath. "It's okay as long as your majesty sees the shocking scene, it will not be a waste of sin." Qin Pingon joked. "Furthermore, you are not familiar with the Confucian temple and the sage of Confucianism, and I am familiar with it." Then Qin Pingon waved his sleeves casually and shattered a rather concealed mirror. "His Majesty in the palace estimates that he is looking at the flowers in the mist at this time. I don't know why the Queen Mother would act like this. I'm afraid the Qintian supervisor will be even more embarrassed. I will never know how to get along with the Empress Dowager." Qin Pingon snapped his fingers again, and the courtyard rippled like a pattern of clouds and water. Qin Pingans were like twisting chess pieces as if they were peeling off a cocoon. Using mysterious fairy techniques, they twisted out a landscape picture scroll. The woman was kneeling and kowtow confessing her mistakes. She kowtows her head again and again, her tears are dim, her forehead is red, and there is a green shirt squatting on the side, seemingly wanting to support her, and she is afraid that the man and woman will not be allowed or not, so I had a shocked look on my face and chanting words so I couldn't use it. Qin Pingon used his sleeves to break up the fake picture, and smiled and said, "I didn't follow the rules before and I saw the cloud tower in the Changchun Palace. I have already reminded you but I still don't have a long memory. Nanzhan fellow Daoist, little Yuanying, it's not appropriate to discuss Taoism with me." Qin Pingon picked up the wine glass on the table and turned it gently. It's Dali's heart whether to toast or not. As for whether I drink fine wine or not, it doesn't count. This trip to Nanya was a lot of thought. First she lowered her frame, lowered her eyebrows and tempted her to gain profit. If the talk was unsuccessful she would start to confuse as if guilty, relying on the dual identities of the woman and the queen mother. She felt that she couldn't be cruel. If nothing happens she will use a bitter trick so that Emperor Song he can witness the tragic scene with her own eyes. In the final analysis her greatest reliance is actually not the Dali Iron Cavalry and the Song family, but she is extremely determined. Qin Pingon in this house is actually not the lord of the Luopa mountain, let alone the Great Wall of Jianqi. The hermit but Qi Jingchun's younger brother as the national teacher Cui Yang, would definitely not want the great situation created by the two brothers together, and the stability of the continents and rivers would be buried in the hands of his younger brother. Is it too simple to think? The lady in the palace dress smiled and instantly cleared up the complicated emotions in her heart, glanced at the cloud building not far away and said softly, although I only saw Mr. Qin alone today, Nanzan must think reunited with two old friends at the same time. Qin Pingon twitched the corners of his mouth. It's a long way off. Otherwise, Daoist Nanzhan dares to come to this alley today and I won't be named Qin. She sighed, lowered her head and murmured, Mr. Qin, the broken tiles really cannot be handed over to you. This involves the great cause of my Dali court. It is my fault. I want to fight or kill. Just leave it to you to insult. Broadcast. Mimi reading app. It's really good, it's worth installing, even Android and Apple phones support it. Qin Pingon smiled and said, why, if you have to repeat the same trick, can a gentleman deceive it? Nan Yen raised his head. If it is not for identity there are actually many ways to disgust you, but I don't think it is necessary. After all you and I are the big Liren clan. Once the ugliness of the family is revealed, the rest of the world will let Howren see us. Joke. Qin Pingon nodded and said, for example when the queen mother walked out of the alley today, her clothes were disheveled and she went back to the palace crying. Nan Yen twisted the corner of his clothes with 2 fingers and said to himself, I don't want to give it to death. Mr. Qin seems to be determined to win, it seems to be a dead knot, then how should we talk next? Qin Pingon said, actually you don't need to talk. You just have to keep the broken piece of porcelain. You might as well take a bet. I bet that within half a month, the queen mother will come by herself and return it. Nan Yan's eyes lit up but she still shook her head and said, no gambling. In terms of gambling luck, no one can compare to a hermit in the world. Qin Pingon put away the hip flask and the flower cup and began to roll his sleeves with his left hand and slowly said, Brother Cui doesn't care who the Song family will be the emperor and Song Chongjing doesn't matter who is in harmony with who. As for me it doesn't matter whether you song the length of Shirguozhua. In fact, your real heart knot is the resurrection of Song Jisun in the Nippies alley from the death of your heart. Therefore the mother and son reunited in the Changchun palace that year. Every time you look at him you will feel worried. Once, a eldest son who had finally become his dead, returned to his eyes alive. He had already made up for all his guilt to his second son Song Mu. How can he give Song He a little bit more? The most hated emperor already I can't hate it, the most feared national teacher is no longer alive. Nan Yan's face was pale, her lips trembled as if she wanted to reprimand her with a stern tone, but rather weak she held the stone table with one hand, her veins violently appeared. Qin Pingon suddenly said, it doesn't seem to be a naughty knot, it's because I want to go wrong. Even if I changed Song Jisun to be the emperor he would not be sitting in the dragon chair by my own son. The Daoist Nanzhan Daoist's heart opened my eyes. It seems that being the lord of a sect on the mountain is more than enough. Nan Yen was slightly stunned. Although he didn't know where the omission was, he would see through it at a glance, and she no longer acted on the spot, and her face became uncertain. Qin Pingon began to roll up his sleeves with his right hand. Remind you, within half a month, don't be clever and make trouble. The queen mother voluntarily visits the house and must return a gift. There is no reason to return empty-handed. Qin Pingon tapped the tabletop with his fingers. A bright orb flashed in the woman's hand and the mirror was reopened. Inside the Dali Palace, His Majesty the Emperor and the Qintian supervisor finally saw the picture scroll again, feeling relieved. Both the monarch and the ministers had some hindsight and finally guessed the authenticity of the picture, and it must have been Qin Pingon who moved. No matter what, a little movement, even if it was Qin Pingan's blindfold, It was better than the deadly silence from the beginning to the end of the house. And finally there was the unbearable bad news of a certain Dali court or Emperor Songhe. In the courtyard, in an instant, Qin Pingon came to the woman behind her without knowing it, reached out her hand to grab the neck of the Empress Dowager, and slammed it on the stone table with a bang. Kowtowing like garlic. The emperor was stunned, then smiled bitterly. Qin Pingon always makes such a noise, so the suspicion formation once or twice. What's the point? The old monk of Qin Tianjian pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, God knows, maybe it was on your majesty's side deliberately to look less upright? The old monk suddenly raised his head, squinted his eyes, some of his Dao heart had fallen, and he had to stretch his hand against his eyebrows. With his supernatural powers, it was vaguely visible that a golden dragon entrenched in the capital city of Dali, formed by the condensing of Song's dragon chi and mountain and river chi. A claw protruded from the cloud, pitch black as ink, holding down the former head. It's just this picture scroll and it disappeared in a flash, but the old monk can be sure that it is definitely not his own illusion. The old monk murmured with anxiety, what a murderous mind. Is it possible that this kind of vision of heaven and earth that emerges from the avenue can be faked? Qin Pingon is now only the cultivation base of the Yupu realm, and the capital is protected by a large formation. The woman in palace costume was about to cross the courtyard gate and stopped. She lifted the back of her hand, wiped her forehead and dissipated the redness and bruises. Then she walked into the alley and she was the graceful Empress Dowager in an instant. As soon as Nan Yen touched the ground of the alley with one foot, the courtyard door behind her slammed shut. Qin Pingon, who was sitting far away in the courtyard, smoothed both sleeves and Ning Yao's inquiring voice sounded, pretend. Qin Pingon said, it's not a pretense, I almost couldn't help it because I was almost certain that when my natal porcelain was broken back then, she and the Fulong ancestor who had a head and a tail was absolutely inseparable. It may have started the layout very early, and it is not the same as others who followed Tibet afterwards. Later Song Jisun moved into the next door to Ni Ping Alley. Shi Q escaped from Sulongjing and made an agreement with me. She then chose to become Song Ji's maidservant and steal the dragon spirit of Song. He created a potential dragon vein for herself, using snake gallstone as a food tonic. Supervisor Song Yuzhong built a bridge with a plaque hanging on the plaque, which is equivalent to rebuilding a suitable for her practice. Xianxia etc. are actually the continuation of this thread. So I just thought that killing was useless before ending it. I am not sure for the time being. Where is the life-saving lamp of Nanzhan hidden? Her real lifeblood may be that this woman who came to the house was rushing to be killed by me. She is not small in terms of acting skills. Ning Yao curiously asked, don't you know how to seize the soul? At the Shujian Lake back you exposed this hand with Dallas' ability to spy and the relationship between Zhenjingzong and Dali Court. It's impossible not to know this, she won't worry about it. Qin Pingon frowned slightly and quickly gave an answer. Maybe she doesn't even know where the life-sustaining lamp is hidden, so she has no fear. As for how to do it, maybe she used some kind of mountain secret in her early years. Shu Shu deliberately shattered that memory completely. Even if the soul was searched afterwards, there was no trace. For example, she defined a certain moment in the future with the help of her clever bead hand, and then remember a certain life-saving lamp. The clues just after this, there will still be some flaws, more likely to be. Qin Pingon suddenly laughed. Understood. Ning Yao asked, what do you understand? Qin Pingon smiled and gave out the word wait, then stepped out of the courtyard, leaned on the counter in the lobby of the inn and smiled. The shopkeeper, how do you sell that vase? Regardless of whether to sell or not, just ask how to sell. The old shopkeeper waved his hand, not for sale. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. How about 400 taels of silver, one hand for delivery and one hand for delivery? The old shopkeeper smiled and shook his head. Forget it, just hit your brat, I know that's such a big piece, definitely more than 400 taels of silver. Maybe your kid is that mountain man, in fact I came here for this thing early in the morning. Qin Pingon angrily smiled and said, the shopkeeper, speak with conscience. If I deliberately pick it up early in the morning and spend 20 taels of silver to buy it, you will feel that you have made a profit. The old shopkeeper let out a hey, squinted without saying a word. Just because your kid didn't look at my girl, I think you are upset. Qin Pingon thought for a while, walked straight out of the inn and had to make sure first. When he reached the alley, he found Lu Jia and asked with a heartfelt smile. My brother, have you confessed anything to the old master? I'm here to ask. Don't ask, just assume it's not the case. The old fairy screamed, "Can you guess this?" Lu Yu nodded. The national teacher said, "Guessing this is useless, you have to guess the content again." Speaking of this, the old fairy master feels weak, thinking that if Qin Pingon has guessed the content, what do you have to say for yourself? Is it not the idea of smart people? Are they so unreasonable? Qin Pingon smiled and asked, "For example, how many times are you going to get dark under the lights?" Luga sighed, "Young people nowadays can't afford it. Can you compete with embroidered tiger? Is worthy of being a brother." Lu Yu nodded. Before the national teacher left, he did say so. Qin Pingon went to the inn again and smiled with the shopkeeper and asked, "If I guessed the vase that the shopkeeper spent a few taels of silver back then, I would sell it to me for 400 taels, how about?" The old shopkeeper nodded, stretched out a palm and shook it. "It's okay, even if you guess it correctly, it must be 500 taels. If you can't guess it, don't covet this vase in the future, and you have to make sure that it is in my daughter. Over there, your kid should wander less." Qin Pingon smiled and said, 14 taels of silver. The old shopkeeper waved his hand, wrong off. Qin Pingon tweeted, "I'm not talking about the justice of the rivers and lakes at all. Then I will go to Miss Lu and talk to her about the genre of the rivers and lakes in my family." The old shopkeeper hesitated for a moment. Compared with the high and low sales of a vase, of course he cared more about his daughters not being obsessed and being abducted into the world. The old man said, "Then 500 taels of silver, and the money and goods will be paid twice." Qin Pingon smiled and pointed to the porcelain on the shelf behind the old shopkeeper. "I only spend 14 taels of silver on the vase, and the remaining 500 taels buy this. If the shopkeeper is worried that I'm still picking up the leak, just take one. Give me the piece." The old man asked, "You really have so much money in your body?" Qin Pingon took out a pile of banknotes from his sleeves. "It is the banknotes of our Dali Yuji Bank. It cannot be faked." The old man twisted the silver bill. It was genuine. He hesitated, put it in his sleeve, turned to the shelf, and picked a piece of porcelain with the best appearance. "It is definitely worthless. It is all the money spent in the early years." The colorful, bright and prosperous bird food jar was handed over to Qin Pingon, and he asked in a soft voice, "Thank me for the old days. How much is the vase worth?" "Don't worry, it's already yours. I'm just curious about you, kid. This mess of Wangba punches is so messy that even someone who is used to doing business like me will be confused. I want to see how many kilograms and two are capable of playing. Let's talk about the market price. It is worth a few dollars." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Honestly speaking, the vase is priced at the market price. 700 or 800 taels of silver is definitely negotiable." The old man nodded. In fact, he can accept it. The vase that he bought with 14 taels of silver in his early years has been eaten for many years. When he sold it, he received 500 taels of silver. "I really didn't bother to care about the book profit or loss of the 200 or 300 taels. After all, we still have to pay attention to being safe. As far as our family is concerned, it is naturally incomparable to Cheer Street in Ichi Lane, but compared to ordinary people, it is considered a solid door, and it will not be less than the dowry of the girl in the future." Oh. Then the old man asked curiously, "Qin Pingon, how do you dispose of such a big vase? Do you need the shop to keep it? When will you hire a carriage when you leave the capital?" Qin Pingon shook his head and smiled, "I will solve it myself." The old man walked around the counter and said, "Then come with me. I knew that this thing is valuable, so I dare not put it on the counter." Following the old shopkeeper, Qin Pingon walked to a secluded backyard. At the door of the east wing, I saw the girl holding a closed umbrella, about as a long sword hanging around her waist. She was holding her breath, holding the scabbard in one hand and looking ahead. Because she was facing her dad and guests, the girl was still posing there. The old shopkeeper coughed and the girl blushed. He wrapped the oiled paper umbrella behind her. The old shopkeeper sighed and went to the west wing of the courtyard. Before pushing the door, she pointed her eyes to Qin Pingon and motioned to your kid. "Hey, I'm not breaking the law with my own eyes, but am careful to be driven out of the inn." Qin Pingon took the sleeves with both hands and did not go to see the girl. When he took the big vase from the old shopkeeper and carried it on his shoulder, he left the backyard and walked to Ningyao. The girl glanced at the back of the man in the green shirt carrying such a big vase. "Ha, silly, pretending to be a swordsman and walking the rivers and lakes, deceiving ghosts." When he arrived in Ninjia's house, Qin Pingon placed the vase on the ground. Without further ado, he first sacrificed a caged bird, then reached out to hold the bottle's mouth and smashed it directly with a palm. As expected, it was hidden in the bottom of the bottle. Among the 8-character auspicious words after the vase was broken, the 8 Xian characters of Green Song Yuan, Qi Xia Du Ming were left alone on the ground. Then Qin Pingon began to skillfully refine the characters. In the end, the 8 characters except for the beginning and the end of with the word Ming, the strokes of the remaining 6 characters will then be disassembled and condensed into a natal lamp between the truth and the illusion. The wick is bright and slowly burning, just the inscribed name revealed by the natal lamp. That is, that wick is not a southern hairpin, but has another name, surnamed Lu Mingjiang, which means that the Queen Mother of Daily is actually not from the Nan family of Yuzhong County, the son of the Lu family of the Yinyang family of Zhongtu. Qin Pingon put the natal lamp into his sleeve, staring at the last remaining Qing Ming. Ning Yao asked, "What is going on again?" Qin Pingon smiled bitterly. The 2 characters Qing Ming are at the beginning and the end. If the first piece of natal porcelain was in the hands of Lu Jiang and is in front of him, then the last piece of natal porcelain fragments not surprisingly is far away. Because most of them were sent to the Qingming world by senior brothers. Probably if I can fly there with the sword in the future, I will have to rely on my own ability under Bai Yujing's eyelids to join the 14 realms. Ning Yao said, "In fact, as long as you become a sword repairman in the Ascension realm, you can be considered qualified to attack that Bai Yujing with a sword, but you may not be able to do that. I have seen Dao's second son Yudo before, and he is indeed almost invincible." Qin Pingon put the 2 characters together in his sleeve. After sitting down, he took out a pot of wine and 2 flower cups. Ning Yao took the wine glass on the table himself. "The flowers are fancy." Qin Pingon took advantage of the situation and took a wine glass on the table, nodded and said, "I always feel that way. It's not too late to find a buyer who is taking advantage of it." Ning Yao asked softly before drinking, "Cui Yang's protector is the only one, but wouldn't you be annoying?" Qin Pingon shook his head and smiled, "No." Ning Yao took a sip of wine and was silent. He found it annoying anyway. Qin Pingon raised his hand and clicked casually, "I feel that my freedom is to become the person I want to be. It may be in a faraway place. No matter how detour, as long as I am going to that place is freedom." Putting his hand away, tapping his heart lightly, Qin Pingon looked at Ning Yao and Ning Yao continued to drink. Qin Pingon patted the table for no reason. Although there was no movement, Ning Yao jumped. She immediately raised her head and stared. "Qin Pingon, did you take the wrong medicine?" Qin Pingon smiled and raised his hand, bent his thumb and pointed to himself. "In fact, there are 2 copies of the letter of appointment. The one that the husband brought is a bit later and the one that is earlier. Do you know what it is?" "I promise Ning Yao, Qin Pingon must be the most powerful sword immortal in the world, the most powerful sword immortal, whoever it is. Before I take a sword I must give way." Ning Yao Wei shrugged his shoulders and said, "The sword fairy of Yupu realm is really unusual, so great." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Don't overhear in the future." "Who am I?" "Don't worry." Ning Yao smiled, got up and went to the door, suddenly opened the door, and then twisted the ear of a girl who had been attached to the door of the house, smiled and asked, "Little girl, what about it?" The girl tilted her head, smiled and said, "You are Ning woman Xia, right?" Qin Pingon was a little helpless. It was obviously Ning Yao who had previously isolated the heaven and earth in the corridor outside the door. Ning Yao asked, "What does the sneaky do?" The girl asked, "Ning and V Xia make a discussion. Can you accept me as an apprentice? I am sincere. I know the rules of the world. I have to pay." Ning Yao let go. Before the girl finished speaking, she shook her head and said, "No." The girl stretched out her hand and rubbed her ears and said, "I think it's okay. Master Ning, think about it. When you arrive in the capital, staying in an inn will not cost you money. Would better open a martial arts gym in the capital to save much money. Right? I really don't want to accept me as a disciple, and teach me a few swordsmanship skills of your martial art. Think about it. When I go to the world and make a name in the martial arts, I will say that Ning Yao is me. Master, you are tantamount to not spending a piece of copper, so you have just picked up the great bargain and you are so rich." Ning Yao patted the girl's forehead and pushed it lightly. "If you really want to find the master, you can find the one in the room. He is the one who likes to talk the most. Anyway, his patience is much better than me. As long as you want to learn, you must willing to teach you. In fact, the whole Feishing city is looking forward to one thing, that is, When will Ning Yao take the big disciples of the mountain, especially a certain wine shop that makes money and loses gambling, but makes people feel uncomfortable? Now in the future Ning Yao's first apprentice will break a few boundaries in a few years. To be honest, the second shopkeeper hasn't been in the bank for many years. Although it is true that he can make money by gambling, he has no taste and a lot of fun. Unfortunately, it seems that Ning Yao never had this idea. Ning Yao does think he can't teach swordsmanship. Qin Pingon has actually imagined that scene a long time ago. A pair of masters and apprentices with big eyes and small eyes as a master seems to be saying that you can't even learn this. Didn't the master teach it once or twice? Those who are apprentices have to feel wronged. It seems to be saying that master, you are teaching, but that is a realm in swordsmanship that even the upper 5 realms of swordsmanship may not understand. Then one is puzzled, one is aggrieved, the master and apprentices kung fu staring at each other every day, in fact more time than teaching swords and learning swords. Is very interesting. The girl tilted her head and glanced at the guy in the room. She shook her head vigorously. No, Master Ning, I've already made up my mind that it's the who eats scales, and I am determined to find you to learn from the teacher. Had Ning Yao not been for the weird Qin Pingon, she would have come to visit. Probably only this young girl in the world can choose who will be her master between Ning Yao and Qin Pingon. Ning Yao couldn't laugh or cry and reminded, read more and don't talk nonsense. The girl would like to persuade a few more words. Ning Yao raised her eyebrows slightly, and the girl shut up immediately. Qin Pingon looked at the girl with vaguely similar eyebrows outside the door. Probably she used to be like this when she was a girl, when she was still on Huangli Mountain. Qin Pingon suddenly said, Miss Lu, in fact there is nothing good about the rivers and lakes, so don't go away in the future. In this life, with a father and a mother who loves you and loves you, you will be safe and stable for a lifetime, better than anything else. Then one day in the future, there will be a Xianxia Yeshu named Zenji who accidentally travels here and sees you, Miss Lu, and then he may cry out or he may be speechless. The girl put her arms around her chest and smiled and said, Who are you? Do you have the final say? Qin Pingon smiled and stopped talking. The girl finally left in anguish. Master Ning's swordsmanship is high and low. It's not easy to say for the time being. Anyway, the eyes are not very good and the disciples who send them to the door don't want it. No wonder she likes such a guy. Ning Yao closed the door, then waited for a while, opened the door in an instant, grabbed the tiptoe and walked back to the door of the house, and put his face to the door of the girl's ear again. The girl's reason was that she was worried that Master Ning would be slapped by people. I took her ears all the way to the counter and then let it go. The old shopkeeper saw it, and when he was not angry he picked up the feather duster and tried to fight. Would the girl be afraid of this? Bounced out of the inn and went to buy a book. In the early years, the book of landscape travel that had been sold well in several bookstores in the early years was not courageous enough. She was distressed by the New Year's money. She was too late to buy it. She wanted to buy it, she would not have it. Qin Pingon, good guy, a thief has a beautiful blessing and he likes a woman when he sees it. It's not serious. I just don't know, did that young man who practiced ghost and Taoism find his beloved girl Sue? It's a pity that there is no sequel to that travel note, so no one knows the result, so sad. Ning Yao returned to the house, remembered something and asked, Why did you definitely have 14 tails before? Qin Pingon said, I'm 14 years old and it's the first time to travel far away from home. Probably from that year onwards the boy was no longer a caged bird and then began to control his own destiny. Besides this, just like the old national master Dolly, he made a joke that would make Nan Yen or Lu Jiang absolutely unable to laugh. In my eyes, Tui Yong, the life of a future Empress Dowager is only worth 14 taels of silver. Sword of Coming Chapter 836. Qin Pingon said that he was going to the door, he was going to the Huishan temple to find the Auntie Feng, asking her to call someone for help, asking the old coachman to ask 3 questions and possibly going to the household office to meet a friend. Ning Yao nodded, took out the few books dedicated to Wulian insuring, picked out one of them, turned to the folding page. She could really read it with gusto. Qin Pingon glanced at the content, swept it past and saw the end of the page. I was writing that the protagonist was chased and killed by the enemy on a stormy night, took refuge and strayed into a mountain temple, met a person, sat in the main hall with green robe and beard, Danfeng eyes, watching the spring and autumn under the lamp. Qin Pingon smiled and said, I bet that there must be another adventure. As long as one of the chasers can walk out of the temple even if I lose. Ning Yao squinted and Qin Pingon only to reward 2 words, shut up. Qin Pingon went to the counter of the inn. As a result, even the old treasurer who was born and raised in Dalijing City could not give the specific direction of the fire temple, but only a general direction. The old shopkeeper was a little strange. Qin Pingyan, a foreigner from the rivers and lakes, came to the capital. Instead of going to the more famous Taoist temple, he wanted to find a fire temple. In Daijing City, the Song Dynasty Tai Temple, the Confucian temple dedicated to Confucian sages, and the Imperial Temple dedicated to the monarchs of the past dynasties, are recognized as the three major temples, but ordinary people cannot go. But in addition, only the temple fairs of the capital city God Temple and the capital land temple are extremely lively. Qin Pingon found the only fire temple in the capital. The old woman who was guarding the door wished that the old woman was immortal. She was old, white-haired and old-fashioned. However, she recognized the innocent card issued by the Ministry of Justice to the gods on the mountain. It was to find Aunt Feng. The old woman followed the rules and recorded her name in a book and then let it go. When writing the name of the visitor, the old woman smiled and said that Master Xian had a good name. Qin Pingon smiled and said it was given by his parents. The old woman nodded, talked to the young man about the taboo rules in the Temple of Fire, and then pointed the way, saying that Aunt Feng was in the flower shed. Qin Pingon followed the route and saw the Auntie Feng. She sat lazily and casually on top of the flower shed. She was drinking in the morning as if she looked like this all year round, except that she was still in that color. The knot is tied with a blue silk. Today she is in a new outfit again, a pink silk dress with red silk and some bizarre words to describe a goddess, put it on her body the most ironed post lean posture moon spirit. I saw Qin Pingon and Aunt Feng just raised the hip flask in her hand. Even if she said hello, she straightened her waist slightly and slightly lifted her eyebrows. The woman was too beautiful, too natural and charming. Trouble, not to mention that there is still such a jar of jealousy in Qin Pingan's house. Qin Pingon looked at this Auntie Feng for a moment in a daze, because he remembered that there was an old man in the backyard of the Yang family drugstore who smoked dry cigarettes all year round. Qin Pingon did not learn that Aunt Feng sat on the steps, sitting on the stone bench beside the flower shed. Aunt Feng smiled and asked, "Do you want to drink?" The most mellow and authentic Bai Huan Yang. Every jar of wine is not young. Now those flower goddesses are still women after all. They are attentive and the cellars are very well sealed. They don't run out of wine. My trip to the blessed land that year was not a waste of work and a lot of search. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded, and Aunt Feng threw out a jar of Bai Huan Yang. Qin Pingon took over the jar as if remembering something, twisted his wrist, took out 2 pots of Xianxia wine brewed in his own shop, and threw a pot to seal it. Auntie, as a gift, explained, Auntie Feng has a taste and opened a small wine shop in partnership with someone, and the sales are good. Aunt Feng took the hip flask, put it to her ear, shook it, smiling strangely. Regardless of the wine, the year or the taste, are you embarrassed to present it as a gift? Qin Pingon smiled and said, of course it is far better than Aunt Feng's Bai Huan Yang, but it is cheap and good quality. Cheap and good quality, people choose wine, wine is not chosen. Aunt Feng threw another jar of wine to Qin Pingon and joked, if you want to keep my pot of Bai Huan Yang, I just said that if you want an extra jar with Aunt Feng, what's the embarrassment? It really loses money. Qin Pingon didn't take it seriously. Since this Auntie Feng was a friend of Mr. Cheese, he was his elder, and the elders chanted a few words, don't control it, just listen. Qin Pingon took out a wine bowl, uncovered the red paper mud seal of the wine jar, poured a bowl of wine. The red paper and the sealing yellow mud were unusual, especially the latter, which was quite earthy. Qin Pingan's twisted, he picked up a little dirt and twisted it gently. In fact, the people under the mountain only know the word Jinshishu, but they don't know the age of the soil. Qin Pingon curiously asked, Auntie Feng, these soils are the 10,000-year-old soil of a blessed land? Valuable drinks and ages are long. Could it be someone who paid tribute to him in his early years? Aunt Feng nodded. I have a good vision. Everything is money. And you guessed it. In the early years, the 100-flower brood stuffed with 10,000 years of soil was divided into 3 parts every 100 years, and they were given to the 3 powers, except for the ghosts. The 6th palace of the mansion and the Fang's Hushin Qingjun, who is in charge of the blessings of the earth, the heavens and all the immortals, is not the old man in the backyard of the Yang family drugstore, and this gentleman has no connection with the old heaven, but in fact it is already very remarkable. Fang's Hushin, which was ruled, was originally a commander's residence higher than the 5 mountains of Hauran. It was responsible for the removal of death records and the name of the upper life. It was eventually recorded in the Record of Immortality in the top-grade Qinglu Zizhang, or the middle-grade Huanglabeijian Longevity Record. Please engrave Immortal name in Fang's Hushan Qingjun Relu signed. In short, there is an extremely complicated set of rules, very similar to the officialdom of later generations. Forget it, talk about this, it's too boring, it has been translated, the old calendar of the chapter is too old and it is useless to say more. Anyway, if you really want to go back to the source, it can be regarded as some attempts to formulate etiquette in the early years of the sage, whether it is a detour, or a road trip. In short, it's hard work. Anyway, if you are really interested in these old past events, you can ask your husband to read a lot of miscellaneous books. Qin Pingon asked tentatively. There is a sect in Iazhao called Judu Mountain. The Zhuxian has a secret identity, named Weibianlang, nicknamed Baojiqing, and is known as a green. Does Fang Zhuxian have a heritage relationship? One of the foreign sword repairmen in the line of the hidden official of the Summer Palace, Deng Liang, is the awe-inspiring peak master of Judu Mountain in Ibeizu, and now he is also the chief worshipper of the Patriarch Hall of Feishing City. Aunt Feng sneered. It's just a little bit of light little Judu Mountain, how can it be compared with that square column mountain? But the founder of Judu Mountain by chance got a part of the broken mountain and barely inherited a little Tao Yunxian. Pulse. As for the tripartite forces, Aunt Feng seems to have missed one, so Qin Pingon won't go into the details. If Aunt Feng doesn't say anything, there must be some unknown taboos here. And in these words, Aunt Feng's respect for the saint of ceremony is obviously from the heart. Qin Pingon hesitated and then asked, "Dare to ask Aunt Feng, who is Mr. Sanshan Jiuho?" Aunt Feng shook his head and Qin Pingon stopped asking more questions. As a result, he only drank a bowl of Bai Huan Yang, and found that the sole benefit was not small. It was beyond expectation. In the small world, those who have not yet opened up the land are similar to the Chujun Shantao Chifu. And many painted mountains and rivers with few paintings, like rain showers for a long time, the threads gather like a rain curtain, and the aura is like rain. He is a real jade cultivator. If he is replaced by an earth fairy, wouldn't it be worthwhile? Is there a rain of spiritual energy? As for the monks of the lower 5 realms, it is estimated that after drinking such a bowl of wine, they will be drunk by Pei Ran's spiritual energy. Therefore, Qin Pingon didn't plan to continue drinking. For the rest, his own practice can be done step by step. Of course, this kind of immortal family foreign objects that help accumulate spiritual energy are of course not small, but in fact they are of little significance. Turn around and send the 2 jars of wine to Zhang Jiazhen and Jiang respectively. Especially Zhang Jiazhen, the small accountant who helped Wei Wenlong, the former teenager of the Great Wall of Jianqi, because he could not practice cultivation, now has white hair. In front of Aunt Feng, he put away the wine jars and bowls, not even the yellow mud crumbs on the table. Then Qin Pingon said, "It'll help Aunt Feng to say hello to the coachman and ask him come here to tell." Aunt Feng smiled and said, "Here." The old man who drove the car for Dong Hu and the Queen Mother one after another fell to the ground outside the flower shed. Aunt Feng rolled her eyes charmingly and waved the dust. The old coachman stood in place with arms around his chest, and didn't even look at Qin Pingon. This little was just a Taoist companion who relied on the Ascension Realm sword repair. "See what you can do," the old man said in a bad mood. "If you have a fart, let it go." Qin Pingon didn't bother to care about this old guy's ability to chat. Really think he is Gu Qingsong or Lu Qicheng. Just straight to the point and asked, "Dolly Queen Mother Lu Jiang, whose alias is Nanzhan, is from the Lu family of the Yin and Yang family in central China?" Aunt Feng looked a little surprised and took a sip of wine. How did Qin Pingon know this inside story? This is a deeply hidden line. The first Emperor Li had already learned the Tao that year and almost became a puppet. Nanzhan, or Lu Jiang, was demoted to the Changchun Palace by the Emperor Xian for no reason. Nanzhan is actually Yuzhang County Nanzhan. It is only by virtue of that string of rhinoceros beads that he remembers the memories of previous generations. Otherwise, with the ambition of the first Emperor of Dali, and the old love between husband and wife, Lu Jiang will definitely not be able to live. It is in the history books, but it is a record of the death of a Queen Dali due to illness. The old coachman said bluntly, "I don't know, change one." Aunt Feng nodded slightly. The old coachman really didn't know about it, so he could not use his head. The old master said angrily, "Aunt Feng, you and him are making trouble, you and I are your own family, There must be a limit to turning your elbows out. Qin Pingon continued to ask, who taught the secret method of the burning of Lizhu Dongtian natal porcelain? The old coachman hesitated for a moment and said dully, Lao Yang and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho made it together. Qin Pingan took a deep breath and asked slowly, Master Yao at Long Yao, are you a Buddhist man? The old coachman glanced at Aunt Feng as if he was complaining about the problems she had helped to imagine before, but none of them were right, which made him lose all the drafts he had prepared. Aunt Feng turned a blind eye, just drinking wine to watch the fun. The old coachman nodded. Qin Pingon was silent. When he was young he kept kowtow to the 3 bodhisattva statues in the god's grave. There was a child who went up and down the mountain and stepped through the crude straw sandals that he had woven, one after another. At that time he only felt that bodhisattva was easy to find, but herbs on the mountain were hard to find. Master Yao. Medicine Buddha. Dong Beiping's Hao. The leader of Dongfang Jingluli world. Aunt Feng raised her head and took a sip of wine, and then she said to Qin Pingon with her heartfelt voice, I persuaded Qi Jingchun back then. In fact, it's right for a gentleman not to save it. It's okay if you leave. You just talk about old man Yao and you'll never leave it alone. Otherwise he doesn't have to take this trip to the Lizhu cave, he will definitely return to Haoran from the Western Buddhist kingdom. But Qi Jingchun still did not agree, but in the end he gave no reason. About an archway building, the plaque left by the Confucian sage is Qi Jingchun's silent reply, doing his part. Qin Pingon looked down at the cloth shoes, raised his head and asked the last question, who was in my previous life? The old coachman shook his head, I don't know, change another one. Aunt Feng smiled, forget it, I'll answer it for you Qin Pingan, don't think too much about who you are, anyway at least for sure your predecessor is not a great mountain monk nor is it a Buddhist monk. People, because I was also curious back then, I went to the Yang's pharmacy. The old man once gave an exact answer. It's not surprising that your previous life may go up. So you and your parents, your family of 3, are very ordinary, there is nothing to speak of. At that time, it was rare for old man Yang to take the initiative to say one more thing, saying that you are just a mud-legged man and your life is hard. Qin Pingon stretched his eyebrows a bit and breathed a sigh of relief. Then there's really no more worries. The old coachman didn't want to stay here for a long time, and it was disgusting to look at the man in the green shirt more. Qin Pingon suddenly narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, Aunt Feng is willing to help matchmaking and act as a middleman for us. This has already explained a lot of things, so I would like to remind you one last thing, don't provoke me in the future. Aunt Feng smiled knowingly and listened, this is what a wise man should say, old coachman, learn more in the future. The old coachman was entangled but wanted to slap a cruel word. But when he thought that there was a Ning Yao in the capital he endured it, but he turned his head and spit on the ground, seeing that Qin Pingon. Raising the eyebrows, the Aunt Feng was also full of dissatisfaction. The old coachman rubbed the toes of his shoes, wiped them dry and then jumped up, his figure disappeared instantly. Aunt Feng glanced at the young man, showing a slightly tired look, human nature. Then she saw that Qin Pingon took out the wine bowl again, a pot of Qingshan wine, poured a bowl of wine, shook it and started drinking and drinking. She was young and had a good heart. Not only calm but also transparent. Qin Pingon raised the wine bowl and said with a smile, Aunt Feng, thank you. Aunt Feng lifted the flask in her hand and drank separately. Qin Pingon asked a question that was curious for many years, but it's not a big deal, it's pure curiosity. Auntie Feng, do you know that the lettering on the back of a statue of a is like a poem? Who carved it? Li Lu or is it Ma Kuxuan? Li Lu was the former master of the rivers and lakes. As one of the 5 highest of the ancient gods, even Nalu Shuiking was one of her summer resorts, and the real position was the long river of time. All the remains of ancient gods turned into stars from the sky, or the golden body dissipated into the time, but in fact they belonged to the long sleep and inhabited in that long river of time. Qin Pingangwang could not recognize whose handwriting was based on his handwriting, but Li Lu and Ma Kuxuan were the most likely. Aunt Feng shook her head and smiled. I don't care, I'm not curious. Qin Pingon asked. Aunt Feng said that someone wants to see me, is it the shopkeeper Yang from the drug store in my hometown? Or General Su, the patrol envoy? The former was told by Lu Xianyang that shopkeeper Yang died without disease in his early years. After his death he served as an errand at the capital city's god's temple. As for Su Gaoshan, Qin Pingan's guess, it is very likely that he will become a hero on the battlefield after his death. Dolly helped to arrange a retreat. For example, he served as the of the martial arts temple in the capital. Zhou Xian in turn maintained a country's martial arts. Moreover, Zhou Xian was from the Han nationality. He used his military exploits all the way and served as a patrol envoy during his lifetime. He is already the ultimate military minister. But it is not those of the A tribe. Once the general dies, he loses his backbone and it is easy for people to take the tea cold. The court was left in the cold. Aunt Feng smiled and said, "It is shopkeeper Yang." After Zhou Xian's death, the last part of his life was to travel the world as a ghost, personally escorting the ghosts and soldiers back home from the north. When Zhou Xian and the last one after Peo said goodbye, his soul dissipated. The Dai court naturally wanted to stay, but Zhou Xian himself did not agree and only said that his children and grandchildren have their own good fortune. Qin Pingon heard this and was speechless for a long time. He just drank a sullen wine and made up his mind silently. In the future he needs to pay more attention to the Su family, at least to protect it quietly for 100 years. Aunt Feng laughed, twisted her fingers and put away a wisp of breeze. "Treasurer Yang can't come. Let me say something. I want you to go back to your hometown. Remember to go to the backyard of his pharmacy." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Thank you Aunt Feng for helping me, and shopkeeper Yang thank you." After drinking a pot of wine, Qin Pingon stood up and said goodbye. "I won't continue to disturb Aunt Feng." Aunt Feng nodded and then asked, "Don't visit this fire temple?" Qin Pingon shook his head. The Five Elements family called the Emperor's destiny that thrived with fire virtue or fire virtue. It's just not the case of the Dai dynasty, so there is only one fire temple in the capital. Like the great source dynasty of Luzhou in Beiju, it is a nation founded by virtue of water. Aunt Feng shook the jug. "Then don't give it away." Qin Pingon returned along the original road and arrived at the entrance of the Wuxian temple. He met the old lady of Miaozhu who also served as the concierge, so he stopped and chatted with the old mother before Qin Pingon left. Aunt Feng continued to drink alone at Sherdang in the flower shed. Binging puzzles, whisking stars, cooking all over the world, refining the 5 mountains, way wise fire morality, all gods admire and stop. After Qin Pingon walked out of the Wuxian temple, he looked back on the deserted street. What is practice? The of water walks the water. What is asking for Buddha? Vulcan asks for fire. After that, Qin Pingon went to the office of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development. Instead of looking for Guan Yiran in Yiqi Alley, he chose a more open and honest way to talk to his friends. As for the husband, he was not idle either. In Dali capital, there was a poor old gentleman wearing a Confucian shirt. He first went to the Jingqing Translation Bureau, and put his hands together with the monks to help interpret the scriptures. Then he went to the Chongshu Bureau and he would also call a sect leader. Regardless of his own Confucian status. It's just that no one is destined to be held accountable. When Xing is like this, who has objections? Otherwise, who else can you complain about, saying that there is a scholar's behavior which is not in accordance with the etiquette? Is it to find the most holy master or the holy saint? The vast landscape of the world's Shanshui Dibao has gradually lifted its ban. Countless news rush to make all the monks in the world, like a drunkard who has been greedy for many years, can finally drink freely only to drink stubbornly. Among the series of events that shocked the world, of course, was the discussion at the Middle-earth Confucian Temple and Howren's attack on the wilderness. There is also Wen Sheng to restore the Confucian Temple shrine. The fifth world is officially named Xianxia. During this period, there was also a not-so-trivial news about the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Qin Shi, who was 10 young people in the world. It turned out to be the person from Ao Pingzhou, but it seems that most of the Shanshui Mansion newspapers have a tacit understanding. About this person I have given a one-off, more detailed content without mentioning a word. There are only 1 or 2 Zongzi Xinfu. Dibao, such as the Shanheizong of Zhongtu Shenzhou, did not abide by the rules and said more and named the hermit. However, after the publication and promulgation of the Dibao, it quickly stopped. Kind of reminder. However, with the help of these 2 diaries, a person with a heart still got a few memorable tastes. For example, after this person returned to his hometown from the Great Wall of Jianqi, he went from the former mountain state martial artist, Yuanying state sword repair, and quickly break through one boundary, become the ultimate martial artist, the sword repair of the Yupu realm. Then there is this person's Taoist companion, the number 1 person in the colorful world, the ascendant sword repairer, Ning Yao. While dumbfounded, wonder if this person is too lucky. Why is it so cheap that it seems to be taken up by this kid? As for the southern sovereign minister and the northern hermit, what did he say? In any case, this young man from Ao Pingzhou, whose surname is Qin, is a top figure in the world. In the official residence of a government office in the household department, Guan Yiran was going through several local river memorials submitted to the household department. This son of the Guan family in Yun's county in Izhou, neither was an official in the official department, which was almost 1/3 of his own family. In this household department, the official rank is not high. Guan Yiran, the best-born, now has the lowest official position, only the chief official of the Ministry of Households. You must know that Guan Yiran not only bears the surname of the Xianxia kingdom, but also a real Dali border guard monk who has been in the dead for many years, and he has followed the General Su Gaoshan all the way to the south, and he has made great achievements. Guan Yiran raised his head. At the door of the house, there was a man in a blue shirt with sleeves on both hands. He smiled and said jokingly, "General Guan, patronizing an official, slack in practice. What if this is on the battlefield?" Guan Yiran immediately closed the memorial, took the book from the bookcase and covered it on the memorial. He laughed and stood up and said, "Yeah, this is not our Qin accountant, the rare guests." Guan Yiran dragged his chair with one hand around the desk and then hooked the only free chair for the guests with his toes hooked, and the two chairs were placed opposite each other, and he smiled brightly. "No way, the official hat is small. The place is so small that it can only serve poor guests. It's not like our Xianxia minister's room, which is spacious and does not need to open windows for ventilation." Qin Pingan crossed the threshold and asked with a smile, "Is coming here to find you, will it delay official business?" Guan Yiran smiled and cursed, "I've come here, can I still drive you away? Besides, there is nothing inappropriate. What kind of character your majesty is, Grandpa said very thoroughly back then. Don't worry about such trivial matters." Qin Pingan took a seat in no hurry, took out a copy of the inkstone from his sleeve and threw it to Guan Yiran. "A small gift is not a respect." While explaining that this is the blessed land of the Jiang family in Tongyi's Hao, a special product of the Yenshan Old Pit, called Shupanking. What waterside hole is actually Qin Pingan's temporary silly name. I really don't believe that Guan Yiran, a person from Aquarius, can know the blessed land of the Cloud Cave well. However, I heard that the Dali court of the previous few years set up an inkstone affairs department on this human's office, which was responsible for digging mountains and collecting supervised stone. In addition to making inkstones for the palace, some inkstones could also be used by the Hu. Selling it on your own is a killer kill, and it helps the yamen earn some extra money. But the Qin family in Longweixi, there are a few inkstone mountains that belong to the family's private property, and they are really like gold and silver mountains, and they are sold on a continent. Dong Shuijing took a share and was responsible for helping to sell it to Luzhou and Beiju. He never touched salt or iron. Dong Shuijing only spent time on trivial matters such as the food, clothing, housing and transportation of dignitaries and people. The Dalihu department is the worst among the 6 yamen of the imperial court. Seems to be scolded every day. The Ministry of War scolds the Ministry of Rights and scolds the Ministry of Rights. According to the officialdom of Dali, the Ministry of War is the grandfather's yamen. Whoever catches and scolds, the Ministry of Rights is the father, and the Ministry of Industry is the son. Only the household who is in charge of the money is the grandson. Anyone can spit. Guan Yiran took the handwritten inkstone and he was polite, weighed it, rubbed his thumb, and the stone was delicate, then picked it up, holding the small inkstone with 5 fingers in one hand, tapping with the other hand. There is the book, the so-called golden sound and jade ringing. Guan Yiran sighed lightly again, watching the mist on the inkstone surface. There was the appearance of the husky cloud, the purple gold dots, the golden halo, and then gently stroked with his nails and looked intently. Guan Yiran nodded head. "Okay, it's indeed a thing of the old pit, worth a little bit of money. Anyway, with your own salary, you are destined to not be able to afford it." Seeing Qin Ping's eyelids trembling, these grandsons who like to be careful, are really hard to fool. Receiving a gift is still so indifferent and stinking. Anyway, wait for the guest to leave and then shake that little expert doorway. Guan Yiran gently placed the square inkstone on the table and asked with a smile, "The 4 treasures of pen, ink, paper and inkstone. The inkstone is there, and then? Didn't you help me get a family?" Qin Pingan sat on the chair and smiled and said, "Probably still visiting relatives. What's the hurry?" Then Qin Pingan asked, "Can't you drink a bar here?" Guan Yiran nodded. "Strictly control, can't drink. I was caught. The fines are small, the recording is a big deal." Qin Pingan then patted the torture badge on his waist, twisted his wrist and took out the hip flask. Coincidentally, I can't control me. A hurried secretary brought an official document. The door of the room was opened, but he knocked gently and Guaniran said, "Come in." The official Yaman looked at the man in the blue shirt. Guaniran got up and walked, took the official document, turned his back to Qin Pingon, turned it over, put it in his sleeve and nodded and said, "I still need to be there for a while, look back." The official nodded and retired, came and left in a hurry. Later, two subordinates came to discuss the matter, and Guaniran both said to discuss later. Guaniran and Qin Pingon each had a chair, both with Erlang's legs tilted up, looking very casual. Qin Pingon joked, "It's really hard to be idle." Guaniran glanced at the hip flask in Qin Pingan's hand, really greedy, the wine bugs in his stomach are about to rebel. People who drink well either don't want to drink it or don't want to drink it. Most of them don't see others drinking. He has empty hands and said helplessly, "Just after retreating from the frontier army, I entered this yamen as an errand, and I was dizzy and messed up every day." Qin Pingon smiled casually. The knife and penman is actually not holding a knife. Guaniran shook his head. When it comes to specific matters, the two are far behind. After a little chat, a colleague from the government office came over to see the official robes. He was of the same rank as Guaniran. This person started yelling at the door. "Dibao, a copy from the Zhong to Shenzhou Shanheizong Shanshang Dibao. I came here from Shilangma. And come and take a look one by one, I can't catch the news." The young official saw the man in the green shirt sitting and drinking, was stunned and didn't care. He only regarded it as a son of a wealthy prince from a frontier army, Guaniran's friend. The threshold would not be low, not the family background. Its character. So when the young official looked at the man, he not only put the Erlang's legs away, but also took the initiative to smile and nod in tribute to him. He didn't think it was too strange and smiled and nodded in return. Guaniran obviously has a close relationship with this person and said casually, "There is no place to sit for you." The man lightly tossed the Shanshui Dibao to Guaniran and sat casually on the threshold. "Didn't you say that you had a friend from the rivers and lakes in your early years? This Qin Pingan is the other Qin Pingan? It should be. Bullish, shameless. You really drank with him and you drank again and again under the wine table circle? Looking back, this Qin Zhenxian came to Beijing as a guest. You helped save a wine bureau so that I will be proud, but I can't beat him and still drink, but he?" Qin Pingon was silent. To say that it is only at the wine table except Lu Jinglong, I really don't persuade anyone. After all, the human yamen is not the well-informed Ministry of Rights and Criminal Justice. Moreover, the 6 parts of the work are clear. It is possible that except for the master Shang Shu, who is known as the local official, the other chief officials on the Hubu side may not know the inside story of the previous turmoil near Ichi Lane. However, the middle-level officials of the 6 yamen in the capital are indeed notoriously inferior. Once the local government becomes an official, if it can be transferred back to the capital, the future is bright. Guaniran coughed to remind this guy to say a few words less. Qin Pingon smiled. Anyway, Guaniran has no guilty conscience at all, and with a clear conscience on his face he said to the colleague, "It's not a second time and occasionally I will tie him at the wine table. Next time if I have a chance, if he comes to the capital and leaves in no hurry, he will definitely invite you for a drink." The young official nodded, then turned to look at the man in the green shirt and asked, "Iran, who is this?" Qin Pingon was already sitting in a precarious position, and he took the initiative to smile and said, "I am the little brother of Master Guan who collected from the rivers and lakes, not from the capital. I didn't just arrive in the capital, so I rushed over to worship the mountain." Guaniran waved his hand and complained, "What little brother? This is awkward to say. They are all good brothers who meet each other and hate it." The young official wiped his face. "Iran, look, this guy's mountain companion is Ning Yao and Ning Yao who ascended the city. I am envious of the dead man, yes, bullish." Then he looked at the guest and smiled, "Brother, right?" Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. "Envy, you must envy." Guaniran waved and hurried away. "Isn't it just a Shanshui mansion report? If there is anything worth making a fuss about, you should hurry up." Guaniran introduced to Qin Pingon with his heartfelt words. "This guy is one of more than a dozen chief officials of the Qing dynasty in the Ministry of Households. Don't think he is young. In fact, he is in charge of several northern states including Hangzhou. Your hometown Longzhou is not far away, and now you are temporarily accommodating all the scales of the North Dangfang. And just like you are from a market. Qin Pingon nodded lightly. I can see it. It was a veritable seeing, because this young official was surrounded by several red lanterns hung by various landscape gods behind him. Guaniran asked, if you're not busy, I really want to be on the Changpu River back to help you two save a wine bureau. How about it? Can you give me this face? Qin Pingon smiled and said, of course it's okay. But the wine bureau will have an appointment in half a month. Guaniran didn't ask the reason but blinked. When the time comes, let's drink this wine? Qin accountant, do you have the courage? Qin Pingon categorically said, I'm not good for a sip of wine. The young official didn't know that the two of them were there with their heartfelt words, took off their official hats, put their palms in the bun and said sentimentally, I'm not busy with things at hand for the time being. I'm not allowed to breathe. In a tone of voice. The case is so painstaking and clear. After all night long, I may go to the Interpretation Bureau in the future and I will not be treated as an outsider. Soon afterwards, another official sent an official document, and the young official with strong culture also took back the mansion report and left. Qin Pingon knew that he would be very busy working as an errand in the department of Dalihu, but he really didn't expect Guan Yi. However, he was so busy that he would leave Guan Yiran a jar of 100-flour distilled rice, and when he turned around he would ask for more jars with Aunt Feng. Guan Yiran was not polite and only sent Qin Pingon to the door of the house. Qin Pingon walked all the way back to the inn and to the side of the alley the young Zhao Duanming waved. Mr. Qin, I have something to do with you. Qin Pingon nodded lightly with both hands on the sleeves and walked leisurely. When he stepped into the alley he smiled and said, yeah, it's amazing. It turns out that there are 3 small worlds overlapping each other and chainsword charms are used. Come on, you are really rich. Then Qin Pingon laughed dumbly. Did these 11 people try to deal with themselves today in order to find the place, just like they dealt with Wu Shuangjiang on a night boat? Qin Pingon was currently in the Xianfu ruins of the formation Master Han Zhoujin, probably the Xianxia opened by the female ghost Gayan before. He felt that they would lose because they lost the first hand, so he was not convinced. Qin Pingon was standing on a stone beam, with white clouds surging like a sea at his feet, and a snow-white waterfall pouring down beside him. At one end of the stone beam, standing at the end of the stone beam was the sword fairy that appeared on Yu Ye's shoulder, still in the image of a teenager. Just taller, wearing a Daoist crown, a saber in a red dress and a beaded dress. Qin Pingon looked around. You guys, don't you remember to fight? The young sword Immortal swept across with a sword and split the Qin Pingon who could not fight back into a piece of talisman. It seems that Qin Pingon did not enter the alley at all. In a hidden place outside the alley, the little monk folded his hands together. Buddha bless, Qin Jianxian is looking for someone else. I'm going to find the merit box. Then someone behind him smiled and said, okay, I'll find someone else. Elsewhere on the roof, Zhou Xian scratched his head because Mr. Qin was sitting next to him. Qin Pingon smiled and said, talk to Yuan Huajing and Song Su, turn around and give me a few locksword charms and the bill will be over. The boy looked shy and nodded. He said earlier that he would definitely not find the place back. Of course, if you really want to fight, the teenager will never keep his energy anyway. He never beat Mr. Qin. In the alley, the 3 people including Han Zhoujin, each withdrew from the elaborately arranged world, all a little helpless. Then one by one was stunned and saw the figure floating near the talisman in a green shirt. And Mr. Qin beside the boy Zhou Xian turned into a talisman, transformed into a rainbow light, and was put into the sleeve by that person. If you are on the battlefield and you encounter a brilliant or insidious like Shouchen, you will have to line up one by one to show off. Qin Pingon smiled and said, let's not take this as an example. Sword of Coming Chapter 837. Chunshan Academy, like Linlu Academy in Piyun Mountain, is an official academy of the Dai court. The mountains are turbulent, the wind and smoke are clean, the river is surging and the grass is lush. An old gentleman walked alone in the academy, dressed in a Confucian shirt, thin with his hands folded. He walked outside a classroom taught by a master, stopped and did not get too close to the window. The predecessor of this place is the former site of Dali Mountain Cliff Academy. Just because the word mountain cliff is equivalent to the Gao clan of the Sui dynasty, it was renamed and became Chunshan Academy. It is still the government-run academy of the Dali court. In fact, there was no controversy about this matter at the Dali temple. Some officials from the Xianxia Academy, All of the 6 branches agreed to abandon it and just maintain it properly, even if it is. The household officials who like the most careful calculations and who can be spit on the stars every day, all seconded this matter. In fact, at that time, Dali Wenwu felt that Xianxia Academy's return to Dali was only a matter of time. In the end, it was a sentence from the national teacher Cui Yang, so he changed his name and Chaotang had no objection. A teacher who does not need to teach for the time being and is responsible for visiting the academy. He's not too old. He met the old gentleman and asked with a smile, "Mister, is this a visitor to the academy or is it just a trip?" No matter how lenient the college is, there are still some rules. The old scholar smiled and said, "In life you are all pedestrians. Passers-by do not need to ask their names. The sound of reading is my hometown." The young master laughed dumbly. Is this dragging him? The old scholar gave a cry which is strange. It is reasonable to say that nowadays, all the big and small Confucian temples in Aquarius Island, from the capital to the local area, should rehang their portraits. The young man in front of him, as a scholar of academy, has no reason not to recognize himself. By the way, most of them are the hanging statues in the Confucian temple, failing to portray half of their appearance. Turned around and talked to the old drunkard with the title of painting saint. Even if your painting skills are already superb, there is actually a chance to make further progress. The young master of the academy reminded with a smile, "Old gentleman, it's okay to walk around. As long as you don't disturb the lectures of the teachers and walk lightly, there will be no problem. Otherwise, the teachers who teach will have opinion. I'm going to rush people." The old scholar nodded and said in admiration, "Young people have a good temper and their patience in teaching should not be bad. If you are good, you should say good and bad in advance and you will also be reminded early. There is a good way to do things. CYZZ, I see the atmosphere of your Xianxia Academy is not much different." The young master feels helpless. This old gentleman is more good as a teacher? But they are good things and they are not annoying. It's just a little bit bigger. The old man's Dali Mandarin is not really authentic. Most of them are scholars from the vassal country. As he gets old, he still has to work hard. It is really not easy to come to the Beijing Academy, so the young master took the initiative to talk to the old man. After a few places where Xianxia Academy was victorious, the old scholar smiled and nodded in thanks, walked slowly to the window, and quietly listened to a question and answer between the lecturer and the students inside. The young master looked back, always feeling a bit familiar. The old man, with his hands folded, stood in the corridor, listening to the preaching of the teacher inside. Yomo noticed the sight of the young master, and the old man turned his head and smiled. The young master turned and left, shook his head, still did not remember seeing the old gentleman there. The old scholar continued to listen to the master inside to clarify. Very good. Today the teacher used to teach the class. It was a young student from the Yang family in Lingbao County in his early years. He was annotating a book of his own. Now he is chatting in the room. Is the content of the Dharma Xing just said the phrase in the book, "Why is it that a gentleman is precious but cheap?" Notes, collections of explanations, brief notes, and today's annotations. In fact, there were so many in the Haoran world back then, the so-called Xianxia, but so. Of course, it was later banned by the Confucian temple, and now it has regained its ancestor status. Various annotation works have naturally revived. Forget it, this statement is a bit awkward. Anyway, it is just like springing up like bamboo shoots and crucian carp across the river. When the teacher in the room was teaching the students, he seemed to be talking about his own understanding. He started to close his eyes, sit tightly, and read the full text of the Dhamma aloud. The old scholar lay on the windowsill, lowered his voice and smiled with a young scholar and asked, "Do you understand how your husband teaches the law?" The young Confucian student had already discovered this old gentleman who was eavesdropping on the lecture, and this college student was obviously also audacious. While the lady of the lecture was still there, shaking his head, he grinned and said, "What's incomprehensible? The content of the Dharma chapter is very simple in text and meaning. On the contrary, it is the comments of those who have mastered scholarship and mastered Confucianism, which are deeper and farther." The young man nodded when he saw the old man's face full of approval. Then the old gentleman asked, "Do you think that when Xing wrote a book and said, 'Where is the biggest problem?'" The young scholar was stunned and laughed angrily. "Old gentleman, this kind of question is so rebellious to ask. You dare to ask as a college student, I dare not answer. The predecessor of Xianxia Academy, But Xianxia Academy, one of Howren's 72 academy, the former master of the mountain Mr. Qi, is also the direct biography of Wuxia. So, as a child of Chunshan Academy, saying this is not tantamount to apostasy, deceiving the master and destroying the ancestor? The old man smiled and said, "Is there anything you dare to dare? Some people dare to say that the 6 classics note me. What are you afraid of? But I heard that your mountain leader advocates that you should guard against arrogance and partiality, and you should guard against narrow-mindedness in reading. If you want to avoid stale writing, you must express your own opinions and post what no one has done before. I think this is very good. How come to your side I dare not even have any insights? I think the world's knowledge is all given after the sages of the Confucian temple have finished speaking. We just need to endorse, not allow us to have our own opinions." The current mountain elder Wu Linzhuan has been tireless in learning since he was a child. He reads books immediately and is rigorous in his academic studies. He once served as a scholar in several states in Dali, and has been dealing with sages all his life. Although the academic rank is not low, in fact after resigning from office in his later years, he gave lectures at several government academies. It is said that during the period of prohibition of literary literacy, he worked hard to collect a large number of book editions and personally published engraving points. In the early days of the Dali dynasty in the imperial examination reform, it was this person who first proposed that the imperial court must add economy, military equipment, and arithmetic. The young Confucian student hesitated for a moment, This one must be an old man who had no fruit in the imperial examinations and was depressed. Otherwise there would be no such big talk, but he really talked about the heart of the young Confucian student. So he mustered up the courage and whispered, "I think that literary sage is extremely knowledgeable, but he speaks more about etiquette and less benevolence, which is a bit wrong." The old man continued to ask, "Then what do you think should be done? Have you thought of a remedy?" The young Confucian student looked shy. "When I was okay, I thought about it secretly. Of course it must be very vulgar and biased. It is just the 2 masters of the master of the academy who lecture on Wensheng's works. Well, now this master is one of them and he often takes care of himself. I walked in the academy and recite the writings of Wensheng repeatedly. I couldn't help but cry. The most respected master Wensheng, I dare not take out the nonsense article." The teacher who had memorized the Dharma saw the absent-minded student muttering to the window. The master suddenly tapped the ruler and uttered, "Zhou Jiagu." The young scholar was dumbfounded. Not only did he catch the master by himself, the key is that the old gentleman outside the window was not righteous and suddenly disappeared. Zhou Jiagu stood up tremblingly. Then Zhou Jiagu found out the window, headed by the head of the academy, came a mighty group of old masters from the academy. Then there was an old gentleman who had just shrunk his head and bent his knees before squatting on the wall outside the window to hide, and got up angrily. The old gentleman is really not thin-skinned, and he laughed and explained with Zhou Jiagu, "It's not going to stand for a long time, it's a bit tiring." Zhou Jiagu found that the teacher was blushing, and mistakenly thought that the teacher was disturbed by others. The young man immediately bit the bullet and explained, "Mr. Fan, this is my uncle from afar. Today is to visit me in the college. No, the uncle doesn't know the rules of the college, so I have to blame." The old scholar stroked his beard and nodded and smiled. "Is very kind. Older scholars don't say a few strange things that pretend to be surprising. Don't be afraid that young people can't remember themselves. Don't just put hats on young people at every turn. What kind of people's heart is not going to be the same? You can pull it down. In fact, I just changed from a little to a bastard. No matter how disappointed the elderly are, they must always be hopeful for the young. The future world will get better and better." Then Zhou Jiagu found that Fan Fuzi was so excited that he stumbled out of class. Finally, standing in the corridor under the eaves, Fan Fuzi looked solemn, straightened his clothes and saluted the old gentleman. Besides, all the old masters, including the owner of Chunshan Academy, can't afford to do the same thing. It seems that as long as Wenxing doesn't speak, he will continue to talk. The old scholar waved his hand and smiled, "Don't be pestered like this. I haven't eaten cold pig's head for many years. I'm not used to it." All the school masters slowly got up. Chunshan Academy's head Wu Linzhuan stepped forward and asked softly, "Mr. Wenxing, go to drink tea elsewhere?" The old scholar shook his head, walked to the Master Fan and said with a smile, "Mr. Fan, why don't we talk about it? In the second half of the class I will teach the students the law." Fan Fuzi said again. His lips trembled and he couldn't speak. Old scholars walked into the classroom and dozens of college students in the room had already stood up and thought. Especially that Zhou Jiegu, who had been talking to Master Wenxing for a long time, was totally confused at the moment. The old scholar raised his hand. No need to be polite, knowledge is important, sit down. Fan, all the masters in the college just stood by the window outside and listened to the teachings of the sages, and no one went to compete with the students in the house. The old scholar smiled and said, before explaining the Dhamma, I will explain to Zhou Jiegu why he speaks more etiquette and less benevolence. Before that, I want to hear Zhou Jiegu's insights and how to remedy it. The old scholar looked at the young scholar and joked, Zhou Jiegu, don't be afraid of saying the wrong thing. Even if you say something wrong, I don't care. Who dares to care? Is this the truth? Zhou Jiegu trembled. Master Wenxing. I'm a bit tensed, said, speechless. The old scholar smiled and asked, then I will give a lecture first? When will you be relieved? Then hello to me. Zhou Jiegu wiped the sweat from his forehead and nodded vigorously. Fan Fuzi outside the window smiled and cursed in his heart, stinky boy, courage, dare to learn from Mr. Wenxing? Worthy of being a student I taught. I have to ask Zhou Jiegu about the detailed process when I look back. On this day, nearly 1,000 masters and students of Chunshan Academy were crowded outside the classroom. The Confucian literary sage, after the restoration of the Confucian temple, the first preaching and teaching work in Haoran, it was in the Daoist Academy in Aquarius. After Qin Pingon swaggered away, the three people in the alley, the array master Han Zhoujin, the capitalist Dale Guling, and the Yinyang family Sui Lin, each looked at each other and were a little discouraged. They were all so deliberate and still unable to detain each other. Get up, for this originally thought to be extremely dangerous. 11 people deduced dozens of possibilities in the inn, and the three of them were responsible for setting up the formation and asking the king to enter the urn. The formation of the formation is far from the slightest difference, especially when it comes to the operation of the small world, such as choosing a more spacious street outside the alley, which is also the only way for Qin Pingon, but the formation borders the world more and not only maintains it. The operation of the big formation is more difficult and there are many flaws at the same time, and the sword repairs the sword, and it happens to be the best at breaking 10,000 methods with one sword. The female ghost Gayan and Lu Hui stood side by side on a wall. She complained, it's not enough, but it's over before it starts. I don't believe in evil, so I really can't touch a corner of Chen's clothes. In lane, Han Zhoujin smiled bitterly and walked out of the alley with Guling, saying, it's really difficult to deal with a hidden official. Since there was no fight, Guling had nothing to do and knocked on the alley wall. It's really a headache. On the Dali spy side, there are not many records of the hidden identity, only know that it is the head of the 100-sword immortals of Tuashan, but as Wen Haizhou's first disciple, the sword fairy Shouchen, the content is extremely detailed. The earliest record is the cogwheel, the interview between Qin Qin and Zhang Lu, and the subsequent record of Shi Chen's deeds, is very long. At the end of that copy of the file secret record, there were 2 autographs written by the national masters. The top assassins are expected to ascend to the realm. Sui Lin put away a total of 6 rare sword lock charms made of golden material, in addition to several charms specially used to capture the circulation of Qin Pingan's qi machine. There is a saying, in Qin Pingan there 11 people are really rich. Like this fight, even without a fight it consumed a lot of Gu Yuqian. They have at least one semi-celestial soldier. As long as they want to spend money, the Ministry of Rights and Criminal Justice jointly set up a private treasury for them. As long as they open their mouths, regardless of whether they want money or things, the Dali court will give it. There is an attendant in the Li and Xing departments, who personally stared at the matter, and the person in charge at the Xing department was Zhao Yu. Han Zhoujin was a little upset, losing 2 games in a row. Even if he lost to Qin Pingon, he would inevitably still be aggrieved. Where is the error? It seems that he knew it was a trap from the beginning. Could it be that every time he goes out, every few steps are big? If you meet someone on the road, he will be considered a trivia? In the distance, Yu said in his heart, it may be the name of Mr. Qin. It may also be a certain intuition honed on the battlefield. Just like the fist is fed, the intuition can also be cultivated. We still experience fighting. Too little. Gayan, nicknamed Painter, was a bit embarrassed. At that time she was posing as a teenager. Zhao Duanming. Yuan Huajing said, they are all withdrawn. Qin Ping and returned to the inn, and before crossing the threshold he took out a paper bag from his sleeve. Seeing Qin Ping gone, the old man put down the Jialing bamboo carvings in his hand, smiled and said, "It's really a busy man. Where did you go to pick up money for ignorance?" Qin Ping gone smiled and said, "Come on, I almost got sacked by a group of small thieves." Of course the old man didn't take it seriously. He joked, "We have kidnappers here in Beijing? Even if they do, they don't know how to find a rich man." Insert an app. A perfect re-engraving of the old version of the book-chasing artifact. An interchangeable app Mimi reading. Qin Ping gone put the bag on the counter. "On the way back I bought a lot. If you don't dislike it, the shopkeeper can bring it to drink." The old man nodded and smiled. It was a bag of twists which didn't cost much, but it was all his heart. Qin Ping gone glanced at the book. The old shopkeeper doesn't just like porcelain, but it's okay. In addition to a few bamboo fans, my house also has a pair of armrests, which are engraved with Zai's brows and Tao Shi Sanqian. It's not me bragging, even if it's a masterpiece, it's worth a bit of money. How could it be really a bamboo carving of the Immortal? Forget it, your kid is good at making stories, so I don't have to worry about making a real thing. The old man saw that this kid was a fellow man again, and while hurting his mouth he pushed the book over and said proudly, "Porcelain and bamboo carvings are nothing. Black tigers know a lot." Qin Ping gone lay on the counter and shook his head. A rubbing and rubbing of the rubbings of the inscription on the rubbings of the inscription on the inscription. It is really not enough to read a few books. The knowledge is too deep and the threshold is too high. You have to look at the original work and you have to see a lot before you can really get started. Anyway, there are no shortcuts or tricks. To catch those authentic things, just one word, look, 2 words, look more, 3 words, see and vomit. The old man scolded with a smile. "You don't have a backache when you stand and talk, so do you guys see more?" "It's true, I really see a lot." "You are a gangster when you are on the mountain, you brag about not making drafts? Brags that require drafting are not considered to be a circumstance." Qin Ping gone had a leisurely mind, accompanied the old man casually, leaning against the counter, flipping through the book at will, lightly tapping his toes, and memorizing the pictures and rubbings of the famous works of everyone, as well as such sayings as de Pubuzu. Be in harmony with others, not kiss or kiss. Household officials, Huishan Temple old woman, old monk Lu Jia, young Zhao Duanming and shopkeeper. Dolly Queen mother stopped, both sides spoke, can look at the same level. The little things are not about who the other party is, but who you are. Then you care about who you are and who the other person is. Return the book, and when he arrived at the house, Qin Ping gone found that Ning Yao was also reading but changed the book. Qin Ping gone closed the door gently, but Ning Yao ignored him. Although the last book from beginning to end did not reveal the true identity of the beautiful bearded man who looked at Xianxia and the green robe under the lamp. There is not much space, but Ning Yao feels the position is the most vivid in the book, the strong. Qin Ping gone poured himself a bowl of tea and took a sip. Ning Yao didn't lift his head and said, "The words at the end of the alley are not like your usual style." Qin Ping gone leaned back on the chair and hugged the back of his head with both hands. He smiled and said, "I was taught by Dao Chang's son. On the road to practice, when the young geniuses I meet are still young and lacking in realm, I have to beat them a few more times to get their mentality. When the shadows come, you will have prestige if you go on your own in the future. The world is on the mountain. Everyone is romantic. By Di Qing Jing Zhong Sui Chu Gong Wu Shuangjiang is a kind of people. Fu Lu Yu Xian, the great master of Dragon and Tiger Mountain, is another kind of person. De Xian Du Guan Sun Dao Chong and the real person lying on the mountain fire dragon are another kind of people." Ning Yao suddenly smiled. "Where do you have so many strange words, can't you run out?" Qin Ping gone held back a smile. "I heard it on the road, it seems in the book. The family background, it's all accumulated bit by bit." Ning Yao asked, "Is there no point in learning without a teacher?" Qin Ping gone rubbed his chin and said solemnly, Grandpa appreciates rice?" Ning Yao casually said, "This group of monks are facing you, but it's actually quite aggrieved. With so many back players, it's useless." Qin Ping gone nodded, "But to be honest, one day I will enter the fairyland. I just say that on the Aquarius Mountain, maybe these big dying soldiers will fill the 12 earthly branches. For me, one of the biggest hidden dangers. Imitating by Yujing's sword every time, after all, it is the rules, and Qin Ping gone is the least afraid of rules in this life. That's why Qin Ping gone took the initiative to go to the Xianxia Inn. Of course, in addition to getting the bottom line, finding out the general details and cultivation context of the 11 people, he really hopes that this group of people can grow faster, and the future will be on the mountains of Aquarius. It is very possible that all of them will have a place at the top of a continent. Qin Pingan's ideas and practices seem to be contradictory. Since they are all hidden dangers that cannot be underestimated, they are willing to help the other party's growth. Qin Pingan casually picked up a novel on the table, turned a few pages, fisted, and the masters of the rivers and lakes would report their moves, for fear that their opponents would not know their skills. Look, at the time at the Confucian temple, Xianxia was like this. Next time you meet, you must persuade him as a friend. Furthermore, how many punches did Xianxia do by yourself? Less than 30 strokes. I am less than 30. Ning Yao suddenly said, "What's the matter? You seem to be a little uneasy. Is there something wrong with the Wuxian temple, or is there a problem with the office of the household department?" Qin Pingan was stunned, then put down the book. "It's not quite right. It has nothing to do with the Fire Temple and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development, so it's very strange and unreasonable." Ning Yao did not ask much. She saw Qin Pingan pull out the piece of red paper from his sleeve, pour some 10,000-year-old earthy yellow mud scraps on the yellow paper, start to twist the soil a little, put it in her mouth and taste it. Ning Yao said, "You can really be a situation-based geographer. Be a baozhai, look and feel good, quack doctor, fortune teller, write family notes, open a restaurant." Qin Pingan wiped his mouth and smiled. "I don't want to press my body with a lot of skills." Ning Yao asked, "The young ghost repairer named Zheng on Xianxia Island?" Qin Pingan said, "I don't know what to say with Zenji, so I just talked to him so that I can travel around the capital city in the future and increase my experience of the rivers and lakes. After that, it depends on his own opportunities and good fortune." Ning Yao said for no reason, "I have a good impression of Ma Duyi and my heart is big. She still lives in the fox fur talisman paper?" Qin Pingan quickly glanced at Ning Yao. "Fortunately, it is not an irony." Qin Pingan immediately nodded and said, "Yes, she has always liked that pair of talisman skins back then. Everyone has the love of beauty." Ning Yao wondered, "I didn't want them to leave Shujian Lake and settle down in Luapa Mountain?" Qin Pingan Yao shook his head. "Each has its own fate. It's difficult to travel in the world, difficult in mountains and dangerous in water. Dangerous mountains and rivers destroy vehicles and boats, if it is easier than people's hearts. So during that trip, Miss Su, the dull and honest boy Zheng Yi, the cheerful and lively and scrupulous Ma Duyi, and many more people who traveled back then were actually Qin Pingan's protectors." Qin Pingan shook his sleeves. He had nothing to do in the Great Wall of Jianqi and refined all the texts of the landscape travel notes. There were a lot of refining characters. 24 texts were plucked from the sleeves of the blue shirt, and then they just came together. Became the 11 names of the monks who transferred the earthly branch song Su Han Zhoujin Guling Yu Lu Hui Hoju. Yuan Huajing Sui Lin Gayan Goxin. Hard work. 2 sword repairmen, formation master, Confucian scholar, Taoist priest, monk, soldier monk, yin and yang monk, ghost repair. The assassin of a young man I don't know for now. The young rider named Su Ho. Except for the heroic night tour, this person made 1 shot. After that, the 2 battles in the capital did not make any shots. Qin Pingan looked at these names while distracting and immersing his consciousness in Zhou Xian. He carefully checked his soul in various big mansions. There was nothing unusual. There were no traces of passive hands or feet in his robe. The small Taoist temple that I passed by before, the capital of the Jingshi Dao's Henjia office, hangs the couplet. The pine and cypresses and the golden gardens raise the real blessings, and the eternal and spiritual temples are cultivated. At the Wuxian temple, Aunt Feng treats guests with 100-flower brew. Because Qin Pingan saw the doorway sealed with red paper mud and asked about the tribute, Aunt Feng mentioned 2 powers by the way, Fengdu Ghost Mansion, Feng's Hushan and Qinjun. Administers the earthly caves and blessed land and all earthly immortals, except for the death register and the upper life name. Especially for the latter because Qin Pingan mentioned Judu Mountain in Ibeizu. Fangzhou Mountain has mostly become a cloud after listening to Aunt Feng's tone. Otherwise the founder of Judu Mountain would not get part of the Broken Mountain and inherit a Dao. Yun Xianmai. The ruins of the Immortal Mansion refined by the Master Han Zhoujin, and Yu Yes servant of the Sword Immortal, obviously have a long history and a faint ancient atmosphere. Could it be a hint from Aunt Feng? Maybe those jars of Baihuan Yonyo are actually just an introduction to the secret? The magical powers on the mountain are endless, and it is impossible to guard against. Just talk about the natal flying swords of the world swordsman. How many incredible magical powers are there? Countless. Qin Pingon suddenly said. The old coachman before had a bad temper and was very arrogant. The first sentence of the meeting was to let me have a fart. In fact, Qin Pingon quite wanted to find him to practice. Ning Yao nodded, then continued reading and said casually, "Don't get used to the stinking problem, why don't you hack him?" Qin Pingon was dull and speechless and sighed, "I really want to fight, right now I can't kill him?" Ning Yao said, "Nonsense. Guan Yiran understands you well, no wonder he will become a friend." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "At the time of Shijian Guan Yiran helped a lot, and there is no such thing as a wealthy family." What I thought in my heart, it was Lao Tzu who gave Yantai and wine again. You Guan Yiran just repaid your friend like that. Did you commit sin? After that, the Changpu Wine Bureau waited. In fact, Ning Yao doesn't like to talk about the book Jianhu, because that is Qin Pingan's most difficult heart to pass. He couldn't bear to say more. Even if it is mentioned on the initiative, it is only a woman like Ma Duyi. In fact, some of the past has never really passed. There are only two things from the real past which are totally unrememberable, and the other is the past that can be said casually. Qin Pingon put his arms on the table and smiled and said, "You know, I grew up eating 100 schools of food. Apart from being grateful and thinking about people, I can't help myself not observing words and feelings. Otherwise, it's easy for those kind people, they were embarrassed by their relatives in their own days." Ning Yao put down the book and said softly, "For example?" Qin Pingon thought for a while and smiled. "For example, there is an old mother in the alley who would often give me things and deliberately carry her family back, secretly give them, and then once passed by her door pulling me to chat. Old mother's daughter-in-law. By coincidence she started to say some nasty things both to the old mother and to me, saying how there is such a strange thing, the things in the family, and there is no thief. Could it be that you have become refined, will grow your feet and go to other people's homes?" Ning Yao asked, "Then what do you do?" Qin Pingon thought for a while, shook his head and said, "I can't do anything." After a moment of silence, Qin Pingon picked up the water bowl. "I just thought of the old mother. At that time, holding the sleeve on the right with her left hand, she stood at the door with her back facing her family, who were all her juniors but wanted to treat me. Outsiders squeezed out a smile as if they were afraid that I would be unhappy. In fact, after parting with the old mother, walking alone on the road will feel uncomfortable in my heart. What's more uncomfortable is that I don't know the old mother. On that day, how do you get along with your relatives?" So later, on the Xianxia island side of the book Slip Lake, with Lu Jimao who should have killed each other, drinking at the same table, is it a matter? Not at all. Ning Yao lay down on the table and asked, "When you were a kid, it was all the affair of the neighbors in the neighborhood. Would you take the initiative to help out?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "How can it be that some words are really bad so I don't care about them?" Then Qin Pingon laughed. "Of course I was really not good at arguing at that time and I couldn't be noisy even if I wanted to. But there is also a way to keep myself from being frustrated. You know the small dam that blocked water into the field, right?" Looking at Qin Pingon who was reaching out for gestures, Ning Yao shook his head. "I haven't seen it with my own eyes but I can imagine it." Qin Pingan's eyes sparkled and he was a little bit childish and triumphant. "At that time I could find a place to hide in Tianlong. I didn't leave for a night. Others didn't have the patience so no one would argue. Beat me." In Ning Yao's impression, Qin Pingon has a variety of eyebrows, expressions, but it is the only way to show such high spirits and complacency. A small child who has been scorched into black coal by the sun is not afraid of walking at night anyway, and he is not afraid of ghosts. He often lays alone on the ridge of the field, raised his legs, bit the roots of the grass, and occasionally waved his hand to disperse mosquitoes and flies. Looking at the bright moon or the extremely bright starry sky. A lonely child lying on the ground looking at the sky. At this moment, with his chin resting on his arm, the man smiled and narrowed his eyes. Ning Yao picked up the book again. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I'm going to read too." A grain of mind mustered, patrolling the small world of the human body, and finally came to the shore of Xinhu Lake. Qin Pingon quickly rummaged through the secret records of the Summer Palace. There was no entry of Feng's Hushan. Qin Pingon was still unwilling to give up and continued to think about it. Record. Some small gains but still unable to piece together a reasonable thread. Qin Pingon spent a lot of mind and spirit on the shore of Xinhu Lake. He worked hard to build a bookstore to store all the books. They are sorted into categories which are convenient for picking and checking. It's like a fishing trip. The fishing rod is an empty bookstore. The fishing line uses a certain keyword, word, or sentence as a fishing hook, throws a pole at the bookstore and pulls out a fish in the pond of a certain or several books. No one taught this method to Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon learned this method from Wen Hai's thorough knowledge and his disciple Pei Qian, and they have mastered it so that they have such supernatural powers. After leaving the night ship, Qin Pingon was busy with another thing. Above the lake of mind he carefully gathered and refined a drop of thyme and running water, as well as a seed of kendo and a bamboo ruler, each hanging in the air, each being used by Qin Pingon to measure time, weight and length. This is what Qin Pingon and Li Sheng learned again. They build their own weights and measures within the small world of the human body. This way, even if you are trapped in the small world of others, you won't lose your head. It's a pity that half the Great Wall of Sword Qi Qin Pingon has completely lost the yin and yang gods. Otherwise Qin Pingon will only be faster when he practices. Qin Pingon was standing by the water at the moment, with the undulating sun and the moon above his head, and the galactic circulation. People on the shore looked down at the people in the water. Qin Pingon put away his gaze, and as soon as he turned around he immediately turned his head, looked at his reflection in the water of the Heart Lake, frowned, and remembered that young monk who seemed to have no sense of existence, his hands suffering. This is a Go proverb. For example, it is like Pei Qian, his pioneering disciple, who is the hard work of Taihui Jianzong's white head. Of course, Guizhujiu is also a bit like Pei Qian's hard work, which is a typical one thing but one thing. So Qin Pingon in Enai Ping Alley is the hard work of Ma Kushuan in Xinghua Alley. And Chao Xiai is undoubtedly Qin Ping's greatest pain in the road of martial arts. Sword repair Lu Kai is where the pain of kendo. Qin Pingon hesitated, turned and walked back to the water's edge, sat cross-legged, and began to close his eyes to rest, pinch his hands with both hands, but opened his eyes soon. A small bald head came riding a fire dragon patrol hunter, sitting high on the fire dragon head, and said, "If you want to ask about the past, the recipient in this life is." Qin Pingon said helplessly, "I understand the truth." The little bald head asked, "Remember the second wish?" Qin Pingon nodded. The medicine Buddha has 12 great aspirations, of which the second is the wish for all beings to break through the darkness. May my body be like colored glaze when I attain Bodhi in the next life, clear inside and out, clean and unblemished, broad in light, magnificent merits, good-natured and dignified over the sun and the moon, various careers. 1,000-year darkroom, the light is bright. The little bald head had arms around his chest and said angrily, "It is useful to ask a bodhisattva. This sentence was personally said when you were a child, but what did you think when you grew up? Looking back, every time you were a child, the next time I went up the mountain to pick up the medicine and down the mountain to cook the medicine, did it work or not? Isn't it considered sincere and good?" Qin Pingon gave a soft hum. The little bald headed away by the dragon, cursing. Qin Pingon suffered and was silent for a long time. When he stood up, he watched the water and took a self-portrait, muttering to himself, "The biggest hardship is yours?" Then Qin Pingon's face was pale. "This bastard, do you want to die?" Mustard quickly withdrew from Zhou Xian. Qin Pingon didn't even have time to say anything to Ningyao, so he shrank the mountains and rivers one step at a time, and went straight to the Xianxia Inn to restrict the landscape. Anyone who is not careful, these guys will invite another Qin Pingon. Pure as God. Sword of Coming Chapter 838. 11 people from the earthly branches returned to the inn before, and on the 2 small hills, Yuan Huajing and Song Su didn't even call someone to come over for a review. The teenager Go Kunnel was at ease anyway. Every time he deduced the evolution of the battle, deliberated on the details and reviewed the game afterwards, his brain was not enough and he couldn't talk, so just do it. The Xinjiao Inn in Beijing, where there is no name, is a bit similar to the Snail Dojo in the blessed land of Jiang's cloud grottos. The landscape is obscured and overlapped. Maybe the 2 houses are close to each other, thousands of feet away, and 11 people. Each occupies a secluded courtyard with additional magic. The main house is a white jade dojo similar to the old monk Lu Jia in the alley. It does not seem to be big, but in fact it is worthy of the name. It is selected from the Dali treasury, the secret realm of various broken caves. Go Xian took the hiking stick made of green bamboo and took it for a walk in the courtyard. The female ghost Gayan is a nominal lady of the inn, and she is visiting Han Zhoujin right now. Sui Lin, a 5-element qi practitioner who can reverse a part of the time and flow, is refining that valuable ancient golden body fragment. There is no such high-ranking gold in the secret treasure house built by the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Rights. The body fragments are not easy to refining. I put aside the rest of the practice and concentrate on this matter. It still takes a full month of work, but these drafts are not too much for Sui Lin. The little novice monk from the Jingshi Translation Bureau realized that he really ran to a nearby temple to find a merit box and secretly donated money. Yuan Ingjing Jianxiu Yuan Huajing, nicknamed Yelong, was sitting cross-legged on a futon at the moment. There was no decoration in the house and it looked like a family member on 4 walls. Behind Yuan Huajing sat a row of men and women who looked like attendants. There were 10 men and women in total, but all of them were lifeless, a little bit less popular and spiritual. After returning to the inn, Yuan Huajing only called Song Su and his hard work, no other monks. After the painful hand came here, I felt a little guilty. To be honest, he respected the sword fairy in Qingshan very much. Song Shubi came here a little bit later, took off his boots in the corridor and then took a position near the door, sat on the floor, glanced at the 10 puppets behind Yuan Huajing. Even if it was a pure sword repairer with such excellent qualifications as Song Su, he was a little envious of Yuan Huajing's unreasonable great fortune. In the early years on the battlefield of Dadu, Yuan Huajing used flying swords to kill 2 UP-level military account monster cultivators. Now these 2 are sitting behind Yuan Huajing. In addition, there was also a demon clan who was a martial artist in the mountain realm before his death. He was also on the battlefield of Daoist companion capital. The other 10 people from the Earth branch fully cooperated with Yuan Huajing, and Yuan Huajing finally picked up this head. This is Yuan Huajing's natal flying sword, Yelong's natal supernatural powers. Anyone killed by the flying sword will become a puppet of Yuan Huajing, and even the soul will be detained. It's just that the puppet monks in pure martial arts have suffered a lot of damage, and their intelligence is far less than when they were alive. For example, the 2 Jade Pure Monster monks fell to Yuan Ying, and the rest of the Yuan Ying, the falling realm, is the Golden Pill, and there are also many puppets who are now in the Longmen realm or even the Sevuing realm. After weighing the pros and cons, Yuan Huajing chose to keep it because of their unusual magical powers. Replace them with higher-level Earth Fairy puppets. Otherwise, after the Battle of Banzhou Lucian ends, Yuan Huajing can have 2 wandering martial artists and 8 followers of the Earth Fairy realm. The catch and fight on the mountain, a Yuanying realm sword repairman, cannot stop the Jade Pure realm monk at all, but Yuan Huajing, the Yuanying, is now a Jade Pure other than the sure kill sword repair. Yuan Huajing is like a sword repairer born for war. If he is a native sword repairer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he will definitely shine with the magical powers of the flying sword, Yelong. The rank of this sword is sure to be ranked first in the selection of the Summer Palace. On the way to practice during the battles of battles, the defenders might be great sword immortals like Yu Qing and Mi Hu. Song Su looked at the Yuan Huajing who seemed to have nothing at all. He didn't get angry and looked unhappy. He couldn't help calling his name, Yuan Huajing. This is not in compliance with the rules. The Chinese teacher once made a rule for us. Tai Li, only those who live and die with my imperial court, can we let the bitter hand use this magical power. Besides this, even the king of a country, as long as he is selfish, he is not qualified to use it. Our earthly branch kills people by this. This is the real assassin of their Dali earthly branch monks, imaginary enemies, one of a few Fengshui Temple Great Sword Immortal Wei and Jin God Sect Tianjun Qishan, the current sovereign of the True Realm Sect, the Fairy Realm monk Lu Laoqing and Pi Mountain Weibo Zhongyue Mountain Jun Jinqing. In fact, Song Su still had nothing to say. After painstakingly sacrificed this magical power, life will be greatly reduced. There has been an assessment before that in his life he can only use it 3 times. Under the Yupu realm, there is only 1 chance, otherwise he would not be able to enter the 5 realms in this life. Yuan Huajing said indifferently, the national teacher who made the rules for us is no longer there. Song Su clenched his fists with both hands, propped on his knees, his eyes were cold and he said solemnly, Yuan Huajing. Yuan Huajing said, I think this Qin Pingon is a potential enemy of our Dali, and his threat is definitely greater than the idle clouds and wild cranes like Wei Jin, Qizhen and Lu Laoqing. Just as Song Su was about to refute, Yuan Huajing glanced at the golden branch and jade leaf of the Song family, who was born in Tianhuang nobleman and continued. His Royal Highness, I admit that Qin Pingon is a very disciplined person, and the rules are almost like a mountain man. Yes, but Song Su, don't forget, sometimes good people do good deeds, they also violate the law of Dali. If we don't have the key to victory over Qin Pingon and Luopishan, it's a huge hidden danger. We can't wait until that day has come and come back to make up for it. It seems that he alone will make the rules for the entire Dali court. He will kill whoever he wants to kill. In the final analysis, it is still the 10 of you who practice too slowly and Qin Pingon is too fast. The female ghost Gayan is a mountain painter profiler on the mountain. She is now in the Golden Core realm and can already make Qin Ping's vision deviate. When she enters the upper 5 realms, she can even make people, seeing is believing. In addition, Gayan has a more concealed identity. She is the corpse who is proficient in color alchemy and can create a romantic account. Lu Hui, who was born as a Confucian Qi trainer, is a true master of the Great Path, but he is a one-character teacher, who is disgusted by Yujing in the Qingming world. The 5 elementist Sui Lin was able to reverse the time and flow in Zhou Xian, and teamed up with the Buddhist meditation's supernatural powers realized by the little novices, coupled with the formation of Han Zhoujin and others, can work together seamlessly, allowing the earthly branch to occupy the best time and place. Renhe, if it weren't for the young hidden official who had been used to the long river of time, his mind and body could be as a mainstay, as if he could completely let the slender water of time flow from both sides, and it was even flying before. The sword directly cut off the time and flowing water, otherwise it would be inexplicable to change to a normal Jade Pure Realm cultivator. Hard-handed is a mirror seller of the legendary 10 bandit candidates. This kind of monks with extraordinary talents is extremely rare in Howren. One of the most fundamental zombies of the hard-handed is a water-stopping state, with talented supernatural powers, profound and mysterious in one sentence. Either one is the other, the imaginary state is the real state. Song Su stared at Yuan Huajing. You really have no selfishness? Yuan Huajing shook his head. I dare not have. If you accidentally cross a certain bottom line, you will definitely be targeted by that guy. Xingyang Mountain is a lesson from the past. Regarding the ceremony on the Luopa Mountain to observe the Xingyang Mountain and the joint questioning of the sword between Qin Pingon and Lu Xianyang, the 11 people of the earthly branch had their own opinions, and they all respected and admired the hidden official's methods. Yuan Huajing's view is different from everyone else. What he fears most is not Qin Pingan's swordsmanship and boxing, not the multiple identities, or even Qin Ping's dismantling of Xingyang Mountain's series of details, swordsmanship and words. Combined vertically and horizontally, divided and transformed, each defeated. It was Qin Ping's forbearance that was different from ordinary people. It's like a resentment that has become deadlocked. Someone who has a bitter heart may have a 50% chance of winning, so he can't help but make a move. Some people have an 80% chance of winning, they will definitely give it a try. More people, if they have a 10% chance of winning, are fools if they don't make a move. But Qin Pingon is different. It seems that even if he has a 12% chance of winning, he is still in a hurry. The layout is calm, interlocking, and everything is correct. Therefore, in this shot, Yuan Huajing did not tell anyone in advance except Song Su and Su Zhou. Yu and Sui Lin were kept in the dark. Yuan Huajing was afraid of being detected by the hidden official of the city government. Fell short of success. Song Su asked a key question, this. How does Qin Pingon deal with? Yuan Huajing glanced bitterly and smiled. Of course it is to make the best use of everything, help us practice repeatedly, and practice until we can steadily beat Qin Pingon. What Qin Pingon has learned is simply the best whetstone, swordsmanship, boxing, talisman, a lot of zombies, plus this person's scheming calculation. If 11 people can beat Qin Pingon, it means they are fully qualified to kill an immortal. Although the 11 were all Qi practitioners, in addition to Song Chongjing who occasionally taught them a few times of boxing, there is also a martial arts instructor who specializes in teaching martial arts. His realm is not high, he is only in the remote travel state, but he was born in the Dali Frontier Army, so the teaching skills are nothing more than straightforward, fierce and decisive. Yuan Huajing seemed to think of an interesting thing, half-jokingly said, a martial arts master who can fight with Chao Ci back and forth, and a master of martial arts who can hold the countless fists of Xingyang Mountain Yuan Xinye. From today onwards, we can help us feed our fists anytime, anywhere and temper our physical fitness. Such an opportunity is really rare. Even if we are not pure martial arts, the benefits are not small. If that woman martial artist Zhou Haijing can eventually become our comrades, she will surely laugh at such a huge surprise. Song Su continued to ask, then? Yuan Huajing said, then? Can there be any other then? Isn't it a very simple thing? In the end, let me slay the hermit. Song Su shook his head and said, absolutely can't do it like this. The painful hand is not high now, and there is no experience to learn from in the process of refining the mirror. It is the first time that the painful hand is involved in this matter. An accident happened. Since the national teacher established a rule with us for this purpose and did not allow us to use it casually, it must have known the seriousness of the matter early. He tentatively said, I want to maintain this mirrored reality. Actually, it consumes the god's money every day. It's not as good as if we can really win that. Hermit, one day let him be in my mirror world. In falling apart. Song Su nodded. This matter is feasible, so we don't have to do anything wrong. Yuan Huajing shook his head and smiled and said, I am not stupid. Of course I will cut off all the thoughts and memories of Qin Pingan. I will not keep a little bit. The only ones who will stay by my side are the nascent soul realm sword cultivator and the mountain peak realm. Takeo's empty air. And I can assure you that it's not a last resort and will never let this person emerge. Unless our earthly branch is in a desperate situation, we will let him take action as a fairy hand to help turn the situation around. In an instant. In the midst of suffering, he heard a warm and mellow voice that was unexpected to death, and it spread from the lake of his own heart, in the stagnant water realm of his life, which made his face pale with horror. Just listen to someone smiling and saying, turn the situation? Satisfy you. The painstaking hand instantly converges the consciousness, stabilizes the Taoist heart and turns into a grain of mind, and wants to check the ancient mirror of the life. I didn't think that I suddenly felt unstable and vomited blood. I stretched out my hand to cover my heart and tried my best to stop something, but the water still opened the heart of the painful hand by itself and fell to the ground. Ancient mirror. On the reverse side, there is a circle of ancient seal inscriptions, palindrome poems. Human heart is square inch, Tianqin Abbot. What I see, the mountains turn and the water stops. View the realm with humans and the existence of emptiness and reality. Raising one hand with a painful hand, he must hold down the ancient mirror like a rebellion. The ancient mirror turned over, the mirror surface was facing upwards, bursting with a dazzling light, jumping out of the sea like the sun, flew out with a hard hand slumped against the wall. The person in the mirror is a young man wearing a snow-white robe, with a sword on his back and his face blurred. It is faintly visible that there is a dark hairpin on his head, a string of snow-white beads in his hand, and his bare feet without shoes. He smiles lightly. He sighed lightly, then raised his hand and gently wiped the mirror surface. Then the mirror opened the door, instantly full of sword energy. The white-robed man with the sword back, after stepping out, the original mustard-size figure in the mirror is no different from ordinary people, with a slender figure, a pair of golden eyes, and the hand holding the Buddha beads bears behind him. Spread the palm of his left hand, lay it horizontally in front of him. 5 thunderstorms. He stood in the house, calmly smiled and said, blessings and evils have no way, but people call themselves. The retribution of good and evil is like a shadow. He stomped lightly, and the whole inn was in the small world of the bird in the natal flying sword cage. The sergeant hears the Tao and walks diligently. To ask the heart, that is, to go to the mountain to visit the immortals and suddenly meet a quiet person like the Tao Xian. This Qin Pingan turned his head to look at the bitter hand sitting against the wall, and smiled. The ancient mirror on the ground, dragged by a ray of true energy, fast as a flying sword, directly nailed into the heart of the young monk. I'll give it back to you and remember to collect it later if there is any later. The painstakingly kept his heart orifice blown to pieces by his own destiny. His neck seemed to be grabbed and pulled out to an exaggerated extent, his limbs twisted involuntarily and every inch was broken. A monk's golden pill was forcibly taken out of the small world, just hovering in front of the painful eyes. And in Qin Pingan's vision, the 2 flying swords of Yuan Huajing and Song Su, after being sacrificed, seemed to fly slowly in the air, so slow that even a patient such as him felt that it was too much. So, he walked slowly, turned sideways, past Song Zu's golden light overflowing natal flying sword, and then came to Yuan Huajing's flying sword Yelong, letting the flying sword move little by little. Move by yourself. He just squinted at the flying sword and snapped his fingers. The houses and buildings were all gone, just like the world. Everything in colors were swept away, and the insignificant white-drawn scrolls were removed, leaving only the heart. 11 painted figures in the picture scroll. Outside this room there were 8 monks with one branch of the earth, and they came to this place at the same time. Everyone still maintained their previous posture. After the young man Zhou Xian finished his walk, he returned to the house and placed the green bamboo stick horizontally. Ni looking at the inscription Ji Yuan. The female ghost Gayan was smiling and talking with Han Zhoujin. Han Zijin's expression was slightly absent. The little novice monk had just returned to the inn afterwards, walking on the road, and was raising her foot. Yu Yu bowed her head, leaning forward as if she was counting something. Sui Lin was still sitting cross-legged, refining the fragments of the god's golden body. Dao Lu Gelying held a book, turning pages. He bends his index finger, flicks his thumb, and a chess piece emerges, throws it high and slowly falls to the ground. After the sound of entering the water, a chessboard appears between the world and the earth. Then slowly approached Yuan Wajing's flying sword. Yelong twisted his fingers, turned the tip of the sword, walked to Yuan Wajing's side, pulled it gently, nailed it into the center of the latter's eyebrows. Fai Jianjian pointed directly through Yuan Wajing's head. He squinted Yuan Wajing's eyes, smiled and shook his head and commented, "Isn't it a pure martial arts, paper-like body?" The 8 guest monks who came back to their senses in an instant have discovered the tragic situation of dying and suffering. Yu Yu immediately sacrificed the young sword fairy, bent his knees slightly and rushed forward in an instant, rising to the sky like a cage blocking her path. Fortunately, the sword immortal attendant kept firing his sword and forcibly cut away the straight lines of sword light. Yu had no distracting thoughts. She is a military cultivator and must be held back. This inexplicable Qin Pingon came to trouble them for a while before he had a chance to fight back. He smiled and looked at the little girl of the soldier monk. Can he not die if he is not afraid of death? Come to me, can you find it? Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of the young sword fairy who kept a little bit of true spirit, and the sword fairy skin. Split it apart and cut it in two. He seems to be hitting the wall all the time. Yu Yu, who was already less than 10 meters away from the person, appeared in a trance, but then no matter how she rushed forward or even swept backwards, drawing arcs and flying. In short, she couldn't pull the distance between the two sides. Close to within 10 feet. The world is turned upside down, and Yu's path is everywhere turned into an unbelievable situation by that person. De La Gelying sacrificed a ridge-moving technique, smashing into the snow-white figure from all directions. Just a large mountain and huge ridge, all in the air, were cut and fell on the ground by a slender sword light and fell on the chessboard. Above it, it becomes nothingness. He suddenly appeared beside Yu, holding her face door with one hand. Yu's body crashed to the ground, but all the souls were ripped out by this person. He shook his head and said, "I have been in the cage for a long time and I will return to nature. It's me, not you." Looking at Yu's detained soul, his pure golden eyes, golden light faintly flowed. "The world is empty, you are just those dispensable household dust." Between the words, my mind moved slightly, and the 2 words silently read, "Flowers bloom." Lu Hui, a Confucian Qi training man, was nailed into his body with dozens of long swords, and he couldn't move, as if a bunch of blood blossoms suddenly appeared on the spot. The ghost modified the whole person's ghost body, which was divided by countless crisscross sword lights, including people with dresses, robes and golden crow armor on the spot. The man smiled and said, "This hand of his own swordsmanship has just been named Pianyue." Young Zhou Xian was cut off with both hands and legs. Daoist Gelying was wrapped in hundreds of talisman within a prescription of the chessboard. The man came out behind Sui Lin, locking the sword talisman. "It doesn't mean much, don't forget that I am still a pure martial artist." After a punch, he pierced through the back of the 5-element practitioner. Song Zu's natal flying sword was pressed against the tip and hilt of the sword by the man's 2 fingers. He shook his wrist lightly and condensed a long spear with sword energy in his hand, and pierced that character master Lu Hui from his neck, bursting out a cloud of Wu Fu Gang Qi, and raised the latter with the tip of the spear. He seemed to be muttering to himself, "How?" In the next moment, a blue shirt appeared on the side of Qin Pinyin, in a snow-white robe, standing with his back facing each other, as if the 2 sides would pass by in the next moment. Without turning his head, he smiled and said, "If you have an extra night sword, you can take advantage. Fortunately, I have an extra caged bird and it's even." He sacrificed the 2 caged sparrows first and got the first move. The latter's self, the caged sparrows, could only be outside. In fact, it is no more. Qin Pingon said, "You can stop." He raised his head slightly and looked at the poor monk who was hung in the air by the spear in his hand. "We haven't seen you in a long time." Qin Pingon said, "I don't think so." The Qin Pinyin, around him in a sense, is like a heart demon that should have appeared in the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm. Now it has been late, but it is more like a demon who has abandoned all humanity. I have to admit that he is more like a pure sword repairman than Qin Pingon. A small world of birds in a cage, densely covered with sword spirit, thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, without any painted scene, the world is like snow for thousands of years. He looked at that Yuan Huajing and said with a smile, "Is it fun, just like a person consciously not doing anything wrong, not afraid of ghosts knocking on the door, but there will be a knock on the door immediately. Then he swears, if there is a violation of conscience, God 5 thunders and thunders, if coincidentally there will be bursts of thunder. Isn't this another kind of sincerity and spirit 3 feet above the head? There is still a God?" Above Yuan Huajing's head, a mighty thunderbolt crashed down, but it was hit by another thunderbolt that seemed to rise from the bottom of the earth, just collided. He sighed, "This is very sad." For example, some of his plans, stealing Yuan Huajing's spirits and temporarily opposing the guest, there are 10 more puppets controlled by him at will. There can be many hidden means like this. But Qin Pingon could guess and know. I are struggling each other. Or he came too quickly, otherwise he could slowly refine the 11 Dali, which is equivalent to 1 person filling the 12 earthly branches. During this period, all the magical powers and spells of the 11 other earthly branches could be dismantled, learned and mastered one by him, and finally all turned into his own use. But it doesn't matter, there is no good thing in the world to take advantage of it. He smiled and asked, "Our husband likes to put his hands together when he meets a monk. In that Taoist temple he fights with others. Will this affect Mr. Chi's mentality when he was young?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Yes." He asked again, "Then why didn't you tell Pei Qian the matter?" She got the gift from the female sword fairy Zhou Qing, so Zhou Qing went on the battlefield with no regrets. It's a good thing, why can't it be a big deal? Maybe Pei Qian's entry into the nascent soul realm sword cultivation will be much faster and it will only be more stable. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I found out that I was chatting with people. Turned out to be really annoying." He put away the spear in his hand and Lu Hui, who was picked up in the air, fell to the ground, lying in a pool of blood. Song Su looked at the feeling that seemed to be the only one relatively safe and sound and despaired. If the other Qin Pingon chooses to be the first to kill this little novice from the translation bureau, it means there is still room for maneuver. Because after Sui Lin reversed the flow of time for a short period of time, everyone would lose their memory without the support of Buddhist supernatural powers. But the current situation of everyone means that there are either 11 people or all of them will die. Either at least the little novice monk will die. Yu looked at her extremely miserable friends and colleagues. With tears on her face she said angrily, "Yuan Huajing, Song Su, what is going on?" The Snow-White Qin Pinyin tweeted, "Teaching people to heart-piercing human suffering, the more others can really empathize with them, the more difficult it is to live." Qin Pingon said, "Since I have arrived, where can you escape?" He stepped back a few steps with his arms folded, turned around and looked at Qin Pinyin, was silent for a moment and sneered, "Poor." Qin Pingon was silent. For the first time he said in his heart, "Qin Pinyin, have you ever thought that the person she has been waiting for is me, not you?" Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at himself. In fact, he can't be regarded as a demon's, he is not like him, but he is incomplete. He folded his sleeves with both hands, looked towards the sky, narrowed his eyes and muttered, "I am more suitable than you. The further you go, the more suitable." He slowly stretched out a hand and beside the two there was a light like a star hanging in the sky, and then a bright sword light flashed by in an instant. The light was dragged by the sword energy and followed the sword light. He smiled and looked at Qin Pingon and said in his heart, "You are actually very clear. This is why Mr. Qi told her not to take action easily. He neither taught you any superior swordsmanship nor protected you too much. Sword energy is really useful in our path of cultivation. one thing, but looking back it can't affect the overall trend of any one vein. Kaidenshin, if you can kill that spirit there is still a Liang. Looking around, at the mouth of the well, if you can kill Cui Dongshan at the bottom of the well it doesn't matter in the long run. He shook his head and said to himself, it's surprising that she really kept her promise. Qin Pingon said, don't forget you are not human. He smiled and complained, how can you scold yourself like that? In fact he can talk harshly. For example, I know all of you but Qin Pingon cannot understand me now. Be careful to push me into anxiousness, so let's not be a sword repairer. Circumstances, the natal thing belonging to the 5 elements, let's break most of them first. It just doesn't make sense. It's not that this guy doesn't care about hacking himself to death, he will only care about the cost and the consequences. The most hateful thing is that this guy's biggest reliance is not that the old scholar and Ningyao are nearby, but that oneself will sincerely believe that even if the road is temporarily cut off, the big deal is that the Chongqing Bridge was interrupted when he was a teenager and he can start all over again. Qin Pingon sneered, this is my biggest support, so do you despise yourself? He sighed, smiled brightly and raised a hand, then it's a special one? See you later? It's a pity that some small talk plus the previously deliberately arranged this scene, failed to let this rushing self, with a trace of divinity mixed in with the new, then this is not possible. Otherwise who is Qin Pingon who is really going out? When the time comes, it is nothing more than to find another suitable time. The sword opens the sky, quietly travels far away, and meets her at the ancient sword-making place. Qin Pingon just squinted and nodded. He looked around and curled his lips. If you lose, you will lose too early and you will be restrained, or you will be more than enough. He looked at the female ghost, smiled and said, dare you dare to wipe the oil in the future? Gayan just glanced at those golden eyes, she almost collapsed on the spot, she didn't dare to say a word. The existence around Qin Pingon seems to be no matter what they say, do, no matter whether they smile or not, but they have no emotions. All the expressions, emotions and behaviors are drawn out. They are dead objects as if they were that. The corpse picked out by the existence in the tomb of eternal ages. He withdrew his gaze, the whole person was like a piece of unsullied glass beginning to break and dissipate, but for this small world he did not increase or decrease at all, his eyes were deep, the golden light flowed like stars and he just looked at Qin Pingon and said in the last sentence, great freedom is to make yourself not free but I can't figure it out. Inside, the small world made up of a caged sparrow, followed the white-clothed Qin Pingon and dissipated together. Qin Pingon was expressionless and did not rush to put away his caged bird and Jing Zhongyue. Instead he immediately narrowed the scope of the world with the caged bird, just covering the place where the white dress was dissipated, and then reminded Sui Lin, you can reverse this short period of time. My flying sword will help you protect the road, open the way all the way and let everyone return to the previous alley. Generally speaking, that self can take the opportunity to separate a part or even a grain of mind and hide in the long river of time. For example, it may be somewhere in the little world of ancient mirrors or the mind of a certain monk. In the soul, it may even be on a certain robe, treasure, armor, or somewhere in the inn. In short, there are countless possibilities. But that self didn't dare, because after Qin Pingon would ask her husband to go back to the Confucian temple, let the Li Xing examine the matter himself. Once caught, the fate can be imagined. If you want it, that guy must want it. Seems to be a superfluous act, but it is not. No matter what, no matter whether that guy has a backhand, Qin Pingon will do it. You will have to trouble Li Xing to check the time personally. After all, he has deceived. It's actually difficult for myself, but it's easy to deceive myself. Sui Lin trembled and asked, Mr. Qin, how do we deal with this memory? Qin Pingon sneered, one by one, if you have enough to eat you can do nothing, then just keep it for your meal and remember it later. Sui Lin teamed up with the little novice monk, and after reversing the long river of time, they returned to each place instantly. Only Qin Pingon was still standing inside Yuan Huajing's house. The little novice monk put his hands together immediately and said 3 times silently, Buddha blessing, go back and donate some merit money. If you do, you can borrow if you have no money. In the alley, Han Zhoujin, Guling and Sui Lin appeared out of thin air. After Sui Lin did this, he fell directly to the ground and was helped by Guling. One by one immediately returned to the inn. Wearing a green shirt, standing in the corridor outside the door of the house with both hands in sleeves. Except for Sui Lin, who was still fainted and supported by others, all the others stood in the courtyard below the steps. Yuan Huajing looks like a dead pig who is not afraid of boiling water. But the sweat on his forehead reveals the extremely unstable Dao heart of this Yuan Ying realm sword repairman. Song Su was previously crushed by the flying sword by that Qin Pingon. Although the time was reversed and the flying sword was no problem, the sword repaired the sword's heart greatly, and now he was sluggish. As soon as Kushi saw Qin Pingon now don't care what it was. Anyway he couldn't help but tremble. The eyes of the young Zhou Xian looking at Qin Pingon changed from awe in the past to fear. The female ghost Gaian directly shifted her gaze, not looking at the hidden official at all. Yu has arms around her chest. The girl is not as tough as the Daoist heart. She is a little bit complacent. Look, let's be cut and chopped. Qin Pingon almost couldn't hold back. He gave a punch on the spot, took a deep breath and said, "Wake up Sui Lin." Guling and Lu Hui on both sides of Sui Lin immediately followed suit. Sui Lin Yu woke up and was about to hold a fist to thank the hidden official. Qin Pingon had already stretched out his hand. Sui Lin, who was pale and colorless, asked carefully, "Mr. Qin?" Qin Pingon said, "Since you guys don't need to go to the wild world, you can get those locksword charms for whatever you want." Sui Lin quickly took out the stack of golden talisman paper from his sleeve, pushed it gently and floated towards the young hermit. Qin Pingon took Fu Lu and looked at everyone. One by one was silent. It is Lu Hui who knows scholars best and smiled and said, "Borrow." It was lent to Mr. Qin. Qin Pingon came into his sleeve and passed away in a flash. Everyone was relieved and several of them just sat on the floor. Just as Song Su was about to speak, Yuan Huajing showed a tired look and took the lead and said, "This matter is recorded by the Ministry of Rights. It is all my fault and has nothing to do with hard work." Qin Pingon appeared at the alley, glanced at the library and sighed. "Brother, if you do this, it's really annoying. Walking all the way to the entrance of the inn, the more I thought about it, the more annoying. I immediately turned around, went to the alleyway, shrank the mountains and rivers and went straight back to the Xinjiang. Except for Go Siuan and the little novice monk, the other 9, one of them fell and all were Qin Pingon fell to the ground.